Order. Adequate notice of this meeting was provided in the following ways. Notice published in the Courier News, notice posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, notice made available to the township clerk, notice sent to the Courier News and the Star Ledger. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Weissman,
Here.
Mr. Tillery,
Here.
Mr. Patel,
Here.
Mr. Reggio,
Here.
Mr. Blount,
Here.
Mr. Hidaka,
Here.
Mr. Mitterondo,
Here.
Mr. Ali,
Here.
Chairman Cahill.
Here. Will everyone please stand for a salute to the flag? The flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Keneally, are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
Yes, there are. The application of Arnaldo Peraza, 1438 West 4th Street, is adjourned until July 14, 2022, and he must notice. The application of Michelle Lombardi is postponed until July 14, 2022, and no further notice is necessary by the applicant. Finally, Lori Sempervive is postponed to August 11, 2022. No further notice is necessary. Those are all the changes I have for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Keneally. I would ask the general public, could you please all remain muted until such time as I call for your comments, questions, or any issues like that. We do appreciate you abiding by that situation. That being said, let's move on to item number 7. 22-ZB-39V, Rinkesh Patel.
Mr. Patel, are you present?
Yes, that's me.
Okay, could you raise your right hand? I need to swear you in. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Absolutely, yes.
Could I have your name and address, please?
Rinkesh Patel, 41 Lillian Terrace, Piscataway.
Can you explain to the board what you would like to do here?
So we would like to install a fence on the side yard of the property and the backyard as well. We are trying to get over the easement because there is a 20 feet easement right in between our property. So we would like to have a fence and protect ourselves and kids from the deer and other things.
And you understand that if the township ever needs access to that easement, you would be responsible for removing that fence and replacing it?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have anything else for the applicant.
Is Mr. Hinterstein here?
Yeah, I'm here, Joe.
Any questions or comments about this, sir?
No, I think Mr. Keneally outlined that one. It's really
Okay.
just the condition that if we need access, he's responsible.
Understood. Thank you very much. Anyone else on the board have any questions for this applicant? Any comments? Hearing none, I'm going to open it to the public. Anyone in the public portion have any comments about this application? Ms. Buckley?
No, sir.
Okay, hearing none, I'm going to close that public portion and I'm going to make a motion to approve this application.
I'll second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Weissman,
Yes.
Mr. Tillery,
Yes.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Reggio,
Yes.
Mr. Blount,
Yes.
Mr. Hidaka,
Yes.
and Chairman Cahill.
Yes.
Mr. Patel, your application's been approved. It has a condition attached to it that if the township ever needs access to that easement, you're responsible for removing and replacing that fence. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. Have a good evening.
You too.
Let's move along to item number 8, 22-ZB-44V, and that's New York SMSA, Verizon Wireless.
I believe Mr. Purcell is representing the applicant.
Are you there, Mr. Purcell? You're muted, sir.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Edward Purcell. I'm an attorney at Price, Me, Shulman, D'Arminio, here tonight for New York SMSA, Verizon Wireless.
And
Can you hear
the board is familiar with these types of applications. So if you could, they've seen the paperwork. So if you could provide a summary of what's going on here,
Sure.
that's probably enough.
Sure. We do have our engineers here, but I'll just proffer to the board with respect to what is being proposed. Verizon has an existing tower at this location. 135 Fleming Street, that's block 1810, lot 1.01. Verizon is proposing to replace 6 antennas, to remove and replace 6 remote radio heads, remove 3 remote radio heads, and add other minor related and ancillary equipment related to that tower. Essentially, what's happening is Verizon has to upgrade some of its existing antennas. It's keeping the number of antennas that were permitted by way of the prior approval in 2013 from this board. It's not creating a situation where an additional variance is required. And this is also an application which is subject to Section 6409A of the Federal Telecommunications Act, which requires that the board approve this application because it's not a substantial change. This is a very minor co-location. It's a replacement. And we're before the board tonight asking the board to interpret the federal law and the local ordinance to require only administrative approvals for this co-location.
And you're not extending the height of the tower at all?
That's correct.
And you are complying with the emissions limits?
That is correct.
And the structure can handle the new equipment?
That is correct. And a structural analysis will be submitted with respect to the building permits when those are pulled.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any other questions.
Okay, I think that kind of covers it as well. Any other members of the board have any questions about this application or this applicant?
The only other thing,
Go ahead, John.
is the ground coverage is basically the same, which is also comes under those rules. And I did inspect the property, and it's in well-maintained condition.
Great. Any other comments? Hearing none, I'm going to open it to the public. Anyone in the public have any comments or questions about this application?
No one, Chairman.
No one? Okay. Close the public portion. I'd make a motion to approve this application.
I'll second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Weissman,
Yes.
Mr. Tillery,
Yes.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Reggio,
Yes.
Mr. Blount,
Yes.
Mr. Hidaka,
Yes.
and Chairman Cahill.
Yes.
We will memorialize this in a written document on our next meeting, Purcell. Mr. Purcell, I'll send it to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Have a nice
Purcell.
evening.
Have a good evening. Let's move on to item number 10, 21-ZB -57/58V, 28 Howard Street Holdings.
Muted.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Jason Harlach from Olander Feldman LLP. I am here along with my colleague Richard Angaski Jr., who we represent 28 Howard Street Holdings LLC, the owner of the property and the applicant for this application.
Please proceed.
Okay. As I said, we represent the owner and the applicant this evening with respect to a major preliminary and final site plan and use variance application. The property in question is located at 28 Howard Street in the Township and is also known as Block 1102, Lot 15.01. I know I'm probably going to be the least important person that you hear from tonight concerning this application, but if you give me a few minutes, I'd just like to give you a brief background to explain why we're here this evening. My client purchased a property in April of 2021. The former property owner had entered into a memorandum of agreement with the township in April of 2012, agreeing to clean up and remediate the property. Thereafter, the former property owner had obtained zoning board site plan and use variance approval on January 10th of 2013. However, the former owner never completed the required improvements with respect to the property, which resulted in a litigation between the township and the former owner. That's when a couple years later, my client came into the picture when the litigation was still ongoing. And as part of his agreement to buy the property, he agreed to enter into a new MOA with the township and work with the township to bring the property into compliance. So that's what my client's been doing for the last year. We entered into a new MOA with the township on April 22nd of 2021. It was amended earlier this year in March of 2022. Additionally, I was before this board on April 22nd of 2021, in which the board granted 4 temporary use permits for 4 different tenants on the property. I came back before you in December of this past year, seeking extensions for 2 of those permits. 2 of the tenants had left the site, 2 remained, and we got extensions for those. Additionally, my client obtained CCOs for all the active tenants last spring, and those CCOs were conditioned upon a final site plan approval. So tonight we come before you for the final piece of the puzzle. I would say we come before you seeking preliminary and final site plan approval, along with the necessary bulk variances, as well as use variances for 2 landscaping businesses on the property, which will be providing landscaping services to off-site customers. For the purposes of jurisdiction, I provided the board with an affidavit of publication on June 14th, showing publication in the Star Ledger on June 8th. Additionally, on June 9th, correspondence was sent via first class and certified mail to all property owners within 200 feet of the property, as well as the necessary public entities and utility companies. So I respectfully ask the board to accept jurisdiction.
Notice is proper and the board has jurisdiction to proceed.
Perfect. So before I call, our first witness tonight is going to be Mike Marinelli from Menlo Engineering, but before I call him, I would like my client, Michael Gore, who is the managing member of 28 Howard Street Holdings, just to give a brief introduction of himself and his business.
I need to swear him in. Sir, or can you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
I do.
Your name and address, please.
Michael Gore, 11 Unami Lane, Scotch Plains, New Jersey.
Thank you. You put your hand down.
Good evening, Mr. Gore. Can you just please give a brief introduction of yourself to the board?
Yes, hi. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank you for your time today. My company, Contract Leasing, has been an occupant in Piscataway for approximately 15 years. We were on 1571 Washington Avenue, the Avis property, and we were subsequently asked to leave because they were developing it and putting a warehouse, so we needed a place to go, and we found the new site that we're on currently. Our corporate offices are currently in the old Paychecks building, which we're also going to have to vacate, and we're going to have to move to 371 Hose because they're doing the same thing with the building we're in now. Albeit a prestigious position. I understand that your positions are unpaid, and so I thank you for your time and your service, and I look forward to working with you now and in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gore. So with the board's permission, what I'd like to do is hold off on any questioning for Mr. Gore at this moment. As I said, my first witness is going to be Michael Marinelli of Menlo Engineering. Mr. Marinelli has been the engineer on this project dating back to the former owner and actually even provided testimony back at the 2012 hearing. So he has more institutional knowledge about this site than anyone you're going to hear tonight. I think he'll be able to answer most, if not all, of your questions. And then if there are any outstanding questions left over at the end, Mr. Gore can chime in. But I think just for the sake of time, I think Mr. Marinelli would be the better person to handle most of the questions.
I would like to acknowledge Mr. Gore real quickly and thank him for acknowledging the board and the sacrifices that we make here. So I thank you for acknowledging that, sir. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Jason, you asked not to ask any questions. I think it would be helpful if he could just explain what his business is, as it's outlined in your application, and what he intends to do, because it seems to be he's seeking additional permits from the county.
I'm sorry, you broke up at the end. He's seeking additional permits
From the county to
From the county.
Oh, yes, okay, sorry. So that would be one of his tenants. And as I said, I think Mr. Marinelli can best address all of those issues. And he'll do his best to address everything during his direct testimony and answer all the questions. I think he's probably the best person to address most of those questions.
Mr. Core has nothing to do with Clean Earth.
He does not, that's just one of his tenants.
Will we have an explanation of that use?
Yes, Mr. Marinelli can touch upon that during his testimony.
Fine.
Okay, please proceed.
Mr. Marinelli, could you raise your right hand? You swear that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
I had to lower my hand to unmute myself, but yes, I do.
Thank you. Your name and address, please.
Michael Marinelli, Marinelli of Menlo Engineering, located 261 Cleveland Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey.
I believe Mr. Marinelli has appeared as an expert engineer before this board on prior occasions.
That is correct. I am still a licensed professional in the state of New Jersey, and my license hasn't changed since the last time I provided professional testimony here.
That's good to hear, Mr. Marinelli. Please proceed.
Thank you. If I may share my screen.
Please.
Okay, the exhibit you see, where everybody should see, is an aerial photograph of the subject site. It's entitled 28 Howard Street Holdings LLC, Existing Conditions Exhibit, dated 6/23/22. I assume we'll be marking this exhibit A1. Okay. As I said, it's an aerial representation of the subject site from Google. North actually faces to the left. The site has frontages on 3 right-of-ways. South Avenue runs up and down on the left side of the exhibit. Again, to the left is north, so we're on the south side of South Avenue. On the eastern side, we have frontages along Levgar Street. And then to the excuse me, to the west, we have frontage along Howard Street. The site is bound on the south side by the Conrail Railroad, and the stream runs through the railroad at this location. The lot is designated as block 11.02, lot 5101 on the tax maps of the Township of Piscataway. The property is commonly known as 58 Howard Street, but as I said, it has frontages on Levgar South and Howard. The primary building with that address is located on the third, the third existing access on the western side of the site, where the primary building or office location is. You could see in the aerial, and I'll zoom in a little bit to, just so you can see the addresses for 28 Howard, which is the U-shaped building on the western side of the site. As I said, we have frontages on three avenues, but there's only access or primary access on 2 of those. Along South Avenue, there are 3 curb cuts. It used to be a long continuous opening along South Avenue, but the township in the last 3 years did improvements along South Avenue. And at the time, we had an approval from our 2013 application that suggested that there would be ultimately 3 openings or egresses, and those were constructed as part of the South Avenue road improvements. Along Howard Street, there are 4 existing curb cuts that are spaced fairly evenly along that western frontage. We're proposing to actually eliminate one of those frontages as part of our memorandum of agreement, which Mr. Harlach spoke of earlier. Overall, the property is approximately 26.2 acres and is located within the M1 manufacturing zone. There is a small section in the northeast corner of the site where there was an existing residential parcel that was subsumed within this larger site. That old residential parcel used to lie within the R7-5 zone. So the zone line actually bisects the property slightly in that northeast corner on our lower frontage of Levgar Street. We actually have two frontages along Levgar. It's 935 feet. And then there's a gap of single family homes and a short 25-foot frontage as well, which of course doesn't meet the township standard. And we were granted relief from that in our 2013 approval. Now you'll see there is an access point on the eastern side of the building or eastern side of the site on Levgar Street. However, is in its existing condition just an emergency egress, and it will be continued to be an emergency egress based off of our proposal this evening. I'm going to switch to the second exhibit, which I'll mark as Exhibit A2. It's entitled 28 Howard Street Holdings LLC, Site Plan Exhibit dated 6/23/2022. This is the same aerial representation you saw in Exhibit A1, except we've rendered and shown the proposed site improvements that were in the submitted site plan, as well as the lighting and landscaping turned on for a little bit of clarity. What you'll see in this exhibit is there were improvements that were proposed as part of the 2013 approval for both the Levgar Street and Howard Street frontages. That included on the, and as part of that approval, it was required or allowed to be phased and be constructed in phases. The western side, Howard Street, plans were put together based on the memorandum of agreement submitted to the township engineer and subsequently approved. The applicant has contracted a contractor to do those improvements. As I stated earlier, and I'll zoom in on that western side, Howard Street frontage. As I said earlier, the northernmost access is being eliminated. All of the curbing along Howard Street is going to be repointed. And the sidewalk is going to be added along with ADA accessible curb ramps along that frontage. Again, that's not necessarily part of tonight's approval. It was previously approved and part of the memorandum of agreement, but I just want to give the board or note to the board that work is going to be constructed actually in the near future. A contractor is online. We'd also, as a condition of that approval, were required to improve the Levgar Street frontage. And that again is along the eastern side of the site. And I'll zoom into that area as well. We had provided similar improvements, some landscape fencing and sidewalk, and submitted that to the township engineer as well. When we found out that the township is currently contracted with T&M Associates to actually completely redo Levgar Street. And because their improvements are more significant than the curb and sidewalk that we were proposing, it couldn't be done at this time. So the applicant has entered into an agreement with the municipality to do their fair share costs for those future improvements based on what would have been required as part of that 2013 approval. So what we're here this evening for, though, again, that's a little bit of history so that the board who may not have been here 10 years ago or 9 years ago when we were in front of the board have some understanding of why improvements were shown there, but aren't necessarily part of this application this evening. What we are proposing, though, and I'll zoom in now to the northern most building, and we call building A on our submitted site plans. This is the building along the South Avenue frontage on the north of the property. What you'll see here is we're proposing to formalize what is, and if I can flip back quickly to Exhibit A1 and zoom into a similar area, you'll see that there's a lot of paved area out in front of building A, but there's not really a lot of formalized parking in the area. And historically, a lot of trucks have been, have staged here and cars parked more haphazard. What we're proposing this evening, though, is to formalize a parking area, including, the necessary ADA spaces, as well as electric vehicle spaces, and provide appropriate striping and for circulation, as well as landscape buffering and lighting. The other thing that we're proposing this evening is to add to the existing masonry building. On the south side of the building, there are two existing garage doors. Those garages have been used historically to repair tractors. They're just deep enough to get a tractor in there and do any repair work that would be necessary. In the past, actually, there was an auto body shop that resided here. That tenant has since left. However, what Mr. Gore would like to do is have a space available to repair his trailers as well. So we're proposing this evening a 40 by 40 garage extension. So again, there are two garages there now. We're just extending them out 40 additional feet so that you can get a full trailer in there, and they would be able to work on those trailers indoors during times of winter and inclement weather. As part of the improvements to the parking area in the front, you'll see a lot of green area. We highlighted that because that's all space that is existing pavement. In fact, we're removing approximately 7,000 square foot of existing pavement and providing a 25-foot landscape buffer along the South Avenue frontage. You'll see that we've landscaped that area as well to beautify and make the site itself more aesthetic. In all, we're proposing from a landscape perspective, 12 shade trees, 2 ornamental trees, 9 evergreens, and 38 evergreen shrubs, again, along the parking area and along the fenced-in paved area. With respect to the fencing, what we're proposing, and this creates a variance condition, we're proposing a 6-foot vinyl solid fence along the area to better screen the operations of the industrial use. This is actually going to be true not only on the South Avenue frontage, but the applicant's also proposing to replace the existing 4-foot high chain link fencing along the Howard Street and Levgar Street frontages with a solid fence to provide a more solid and adequate screen. There is, as I said, in the northeast corner, there were some existing residential lots. The applicant is proposing to expand into that area since it's now part of the overall industrial site with some additional trailer storage in the stone area. Now to talk a little bit about the tenant, CLC is the primary user, and again, the owner of the 28 Howard Street holdings. They actually occupy Building A and are going to utilize this new parking area for their offices on this site. If you've been out to the site recently, you'll see that the eastern side of the site is now utilized. It wasn't at the time of this aerial, but is now utilized for tractor trailer storage. We provided a tenant document that shows that they can store 200 trailers at this location and still provide safe egress in and out of the site along this eastern side. If I may flip to my third exhibit, since we're on the topic of tenants, this was a submitted document, so I don't think it has to be added to the record as an exhibit. This is the tenant exhibit dated December 6th of 2021. When we gained approval from this board, along with all the use variances back in 2013, there were 16 tenants on site, and a majority of them were fly-by-night landscape companies. You could see that the current owner has dwindled that number all the way down to 7 existing tenants, 4 of which are tenants with long leases from the original owner, including Abbey Hart, which is designated in the center of the exhibit as Area 4. That's the block company. They also utilize most of the office at 28 Howard Street. And the existing parking in that area. Stericycle, which is now Clean Earth, or associated with clean earth, it continues in space 6. It's the southwesternmost tenant. I think Mr. Chadwick had requested a little bit more testimony regarding to their operations. What they do is they bring containers, drums really, in tractor trailers to and from this site, and then distribute them or bring them to places where if it is either contaminated soil and or historic fill, they can then test it and ship it back out or dispose of it off-site in appropriate manners. The application before the county and DEP was just to not intensify their existing use, but to just broaden the spectrum of materials that they can have on site to include more solid wastes, not just dirt, but more solid wastes. Those applications were actually approved on both of those levels by those agencies. And they're just looking to continue to operate the way they do today, where they bring in tractor trailers with barrels of material, test and find out what the material is, and then export it off-site in the same containers that they came in via tractor trailers.
So, Mr. Marinelli, I'm just gonna jump in real quick and just ask you a few questions about this, if you don't mind. So, it's true that this is a transfer station only, correct?
Yes.
For them. So it's known as what they call a 10-day facility, correct?
Yes.
Which means that any waste that comes on the facility must be rerouted to another approved location within 10 days, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and they come in sealed containers, and the containers remain sealed. I think you might have said that they're tested. Nothing's tested on site, correct? It's more of just a transfer station.
I'm sorry, I misspoke in testing. Yes, they transfer them from this location.
Okay, so they come sealed, and so my understanding is the only real change here with respect to the Clean Earth applications that Clean Earth made was just the types of materials that are in those containers, but nothing else is going to change with respect to their operation, as far as you know.
That's correct. And again, they have been reviewed and approved by the county and DEP, and they, from what I understand, have received those approvals already.
I'd also, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mike, but I'd also like to add that actually what their permit is to temporarily store, as Jason had said, non-hazardous, non-putrescible retail waste. So it's not even hazardous dirt, it's just retail waste.
All right, thanks, Mr. Gore. I appreciate that. Okay, Mike, I think that hits the Clean Earth, if you want to.
Okay, so
Can I ask one quick question. Do you take these
Go ahead,
barrels
John.
off the trucks?
Repeat the question, John.
I'm sorry.
Do you take the barrels off the trucks? Are they stored someplace on the ground?
not internal to the building, from my understanding.
Yeah,
They're not stored outside. They're brought in on trucks, brought in and then transferred to different trucks. And as Mr. Harlock said earlier, it's a 10-day facility, so they can't stay on site longer than 10 days. If they come off the truck at all.
Because your application seemed to indicate there's quite a volume involved here. Large number of trucks.
So, Mr. Chadwick, this is with respect to this tenant only. They are not involved with any of the trailers or the trucks. This is a separate tenant that's operating, just bringing these containers in, storing them inside only, and then it's a 10-day facility, and they flip them back out to another facility within that 10-day period. This is separate and apart from the trailers that contract leasing and/or the Gilbert company may have on the site.
Does your memorandum of agreement with the township deal with this particular use?
The memorandum of agreement does not deal with any of the particular uses, other than that we would need to get use variance approval for the non-permitted uses, which would be the landscaping companies. And my colleague, Richard Nangowski, who is here this evening, as well as I introduced him at the beginning, he can also speak to this as well.
Hi, everyone. Mr. Horvath and I worked on this application together, and it's a large application, so I
Okay,
just
I
wanted to briefly.
suspect I know who you are, but could you identify yourself for the record?
I apologize, Jim. Richard J. Angowski Jr. from Olander Feldman LLP for the applicant.
Thank you.
So as it relates to Clean Earth and Stericycle, I can understand the board's concerns. As a sitting board member myself in another municipality, we deal with things like this all the time. And it's one of the things that Mr. Gore and I spoke about at length. It's a transfer station, and one of the benefits to the township is that it's highly regulated above anything from the township or even the county and the state. It's federally regulated when you're dealing with waste and fill. So what they do is, in my understanding, is that it's simply a transfer station. As it relates to the memorandum of understanding, this is a permitted use. So the memorandum of understanding dealt with the improvements to the perimeter of the property. And that's what we're here for today. But it is a permitted use on the site and has been a permitted use for many years. So Mr. Chadwick, the concerns that you have about them storing any fill outside, they're well understood, but those aren't concerns. They do everything internally. It's actually a nice facility. And they, even beyond us as a landlord, have to comply with all state and federal regulations.
My basic concern was we were gonna have hazardous waste. What you just said is that it does not involve some form of liquid hazardous waste, which is a prohibited activity in the township.
That's correct, Mr. Chadwick. It does not inform some form of liquid hazardous waste. We're not dealing with,
But the memo of agreement doesn't address this, so the board's resolution, if they approve, should.
Mr. Chadwick, I would only tend to differ in that it is a permitted use in terms of if Stericycle's applying for additional permitting, then, and the board wants to resolve to, make note of it, we always accept the board's resolutions. I agree with that. The one thing I would say is that it's our understanding that this is not a hazardous facility where waste is coming on site and being opened from barrels and being tested on site.
Yeah, I agree with you. What you described is what the permits and, business model that they have. Let's just make sure we detail what you are.
Very good. So, I mean, Mr. Marinelli, do you have anything to add? I mean, I think your understanding was what you testified to, correct?
That's correct. And I just would like to note that it was, Stericycle was part of the 2013 application and is an approved use on site. And again, we're changing the types of materials on site, but they're still non-toxic. But it's still the same use and operations that has existed for the last 15 years at this site.
Okay.
Mr. Marinelli, Henry here. Quick question, the additional materials that you're looking to bring on with the expansion of the permitting, you talked about, I think it was retail waste or industrial waste. That is not hazardous material. That's more just standard retail waste. And will that be in sealed containers as well and only transferred?
That's correct. It's non-hazardous, non-toxic retail material that is transported to and from the site, but not opened or stored external to the building.
All right, thank you.
So again, we're here this evening to talk about the improvements along South Avenue. I just kind of wanted to go through again the history of the tenants that did exist on site, the tenants that exist today, and then the future operations. Again, Mr. Gore runs a company that has tractor trailers that he leases across the country. And as he stated, he's been in multiple locations in Piscataway and likes it here, and found the opportunity to buy this particular property, even though he knew he was going to have to do some work to dress it up and make it more aesthetic. Getting back to the lighting landscape, I went through the landscape. We're also providing proposed lighting for this proposed formalized parking area on the north side of the site. It includes 3 pole mounted fixtures. It has been asked by your professionals that we make those dark sky compliant LED downcasting fixtures. Of course, the applicant agrees to comply with that. The submitted design called for a 0.7 foot candle minimum and a 2.43 average. So it's a safe lighting condition, is not overlit in this area. They would be on timers, of course, used only when necessary and during hours of operations in this area. From a stormwater management perspective, as I said, we're removing 7,000 square feet of existing asphalt and providing landscape. So no stormwater management is required. Generally speaking, the drainage in this area of improvement drains from the Building A on the northern side towards South Avenue. We're not changing the drainage pattern on site. In fact, most of this is parking lot is existing pavement that is going to be milled and overlaid to provide a nice clean surface and then adequately striped for safe parking, totaling 25 parking spaces in this area. A building of this size requires 16 parking spaces. So we're actually above what would be required, but making sure that we have adequate space for the applicant. I don't know if the board wants me to go through all of the non-conforming or non-conformances the site has in the existing condition, because they were approved as part of our 2013 approval as existing non-conformances. And I just wanted to confirm whether you wanted us to rehash that, or if they would just be continued variance conditions.
If the board previously approved it, then I don't think there's a need to go through that detail.
And just to highlight them quickly, there are a few structures on site that had existing setbacks. I spoke to the short 25-foot Levgar frontage that caused both a width and frontage issue. And then, as you can see from the aerial, the existing site is stone in most areas where there's loading. The parking areas are in fact paved, but the loading areas are stone, and that was a waiver that was again approved back in 2013 and will be a continuing condition.
Good, okay.
Could I ask you a question about the fence? Was the detail of the fence in the site plan?
I heard you, Mr. Chadwick. I'm just trying to see what page it was on so I can refer to it. It was included on page 10 of the submitted site plans, construction details 1. It's in the upper left corner. It calls for a 6-foot high solid vinyl fence.
Henry,
Do the applicant have any issue with making that vinyl fence any color other than white? Just don't know how good white is gonna blend with an industrial site.
that's exactly where I was going, Henry.
Yeah,
They make
it might
these
not be
things
white for long.
Yeah,
And,
they make these things also that don't, when the headlights hit them, they don't shine.
Reflect.
They're muted. And if we could just agree that we'd have a
Agreed.
We are-
non-white, non-reflective fence.
Yeah, we are completely fine with non-white fence.
I believe non-reflective was also,
Yeah.
okay.
There's one other question while you have this chart up. That triangular area next to the new driveway access, how are you going to get in and out of there?
It'll be just basically an expansion. Instead of being the parking
there-
area with South Avenue, it'll be part of the trailer storage area. And we're running the fence along the 25-foot front yard setback.
Trailers are going to be out there now.
That is correct. Similar to how they are on the eastern side of that second egress on South Avenue.
Okay.
Anything else, John?
No.
Okay,
Oh, well, clean up. You got a list of tenants, 8, and you got 7 sites on the plan.
I'm not sure the confusion there, Mr. Chadwick. Again, I had up the third exhibit I showed. There are 7 tenants
Okay,
listed on
actually,
site.
Mr. Chadwick, I can actually speak to that. The original submission, when we made this last year in the fall, there were 8 tenants. In my opening, I talked to you about the 4 temporary use variances we got in the fall. 2 of the tenants left the site, which brought us to 6. We took on a new tenant, which is the other trailer company, the Gilbert Group. That became tenant 7. So that's the disconnect. If you're looking at the original list, you'll see 8 tenants. There was a resubmission made in the fall with a new list of the 7 tenants.
okay. The reason I asked the question, the plan has these delineated sites for different tenants. Assume the board approves this plan. Is this what you're going to have to live with in the future? Or could some of these be further subdivided? And does the memorandum of agreement limit the number of tenants?
The memorandum of agreement does not limit the number of tenants. This is not a subdivision. We're not contemplating any subdivisions. The township professional has just asked us to prepare and provide this plan just so we can give a rough outline as to where the tenants are located and how people would get around the site. This is not meant to be a representation of limits on anyone's property. It's just an idea of where they're located. There may be tenants that leave. There may be tenants that come in. Obviously, if they're permitted uses, the proper channels with respect to getting COs or getting approvals for new tenants. If it's a not permitted use, obviously we'd have to come back before you for a use variance of some kind. But for the sake of this exhibit, it's mainly just to show kind of the location of each tenant roughly and how they would traverse the site.
And if I may add, Mr. Chadwick, the 2 tenants that currently are non-conforming are the 2 landscape tenants, which are 7, which is the area on the eastern side of the site on Howard Street, and 5, which is Diaz. Those are the 2 tenants that were the reason we're here for use variance. Those 2 tenants are non-complying uses within the zone, and those are the 2 specific tenants that we need approval for this evening.
I mean, this site's been bouncing around in front of the township now for decades.
Yeah.
Now, your client is obviously seems to have stepped up to the plate, done something. Somebody goes and looks at the records 10 years from now and says, wait a minute, these locations don't bear any relationship to what's going on out there. And now we're back in a big mess trying to figure out. So this map is going to be, it's included in the site plan application, but it's not binding on tenant location.
Agreed. Mr. Chadwick, my client is looking to make this their, for lack of a better term, forever home. He's looking to make this his space in Piscataway. Obviously, he talked at the beginning about being in Piscataway for some time. It's going to be his flagship location. And he's inherited some of these tenants. Mr. Marinelli can talk about the history, and I'm sure a lot of members of the board know the history of the site. Back in 2012, 2013, there were upwards of like 16 tenants, and I would say 8 to 10 that were either landscapers that needed use variances. We're down now to the 2. They, and truthfully, in a perfect world, he would have fewer tenants, not less, and he's looking to deal with more national, larger companies. But obviously, he has the hand he's been dealt with some of his tenants that are on pre-existing leases. So I'm not going to stand here before you and say that the tenants may not change over time, but this map is just, like I said, a kind of a general location of where people are to date, and things may in fact change over time, but hopefully only for the better.
We're beating this to death. This map is not binding on future tenants or existing tenants in terms of their allocated space. It is going to show what existed on 6/23/22.
Exactly. Perfect.
And that concludes my direct testimony.
Great. Anybody on the board have any questions for Mr. Arnelli?
Mr.
Any comments?
Marinelli, would you like to go through the staff report? My staff report at this time?
Great. Yeah, let's go over the site impact.
Surely. Item 1 is regarding the affordable housing obligation. Obviously, the applicant would agree to comply. We spoke in depth related to testimony for the use variance, although it's not a use variance for the Stericycle Clean Earth. That's a permitted use, but we clarified what that use is. All DEP permits shall be secured. In fact, the site already has a flood hazard verification as well as a wetland LOI. None of the proposed improvements are impacted by those or the buffers included in those. We agreed to have the grading and drainage plan reviewed by the Township Engineer Charlie Carley and DNR Raritan Engineering. Again, it's an overall reduction in impervious coverage, so stormwater management wasn't necessary, but we will definitely confirm that with Mr. Carley. Item 5 relates to Mr. Herrera's memo. In Mr. Herrera's memo, I'd just like to clarify, he speaks to some of the Howard Street improvements. Again, those are part of the MOA and have already been approved and are slated to be constructed. So other than those comments within Mr. Herrera's memo, we would agree to comply. He had some comments related to the types of curbing, striping, and pavement utilized on the site, and we, of course, would provide those details as a condition of the approval. We did receive approval from the fire commissioner. It was submitted, it was given to us this week from the township representatives. I provide testimony that we will meet the EV parking requirements in this new parking area. Title 39 will be granted. The applicant agrees to that condition. I believe item 9 is a comment related to the old site plan and the South Avenue improvements. I'm unaware of any future South Avenue improvements, considering they were just done in the last 5 years. But should there be any?
Was a leftover, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So item 9, obviously the South Avenue improvements have already been completed and we wouldn't need to address that. Item 10, I spoke to the improvements as part of the MOA and the Levgar Street improvements and our fair share contributions. Those are in conformance with that curb and sidewalk construction plans provided to the municipality. I provided testimony that we would provide LED lighting on site, and the applicant agrees to provide additional buffering along the western side, along the eastern side of the proposed parking area to further buffer the existing residences on that side. And then the documentation from Middlesex County shall be provided upon approval.
Okay, Henry, any other questions? Henry? We good? Okay. Jason, any other witnesses?
Yes, our planner, Mr. Paul Greigel.
Okay,
Hello. Good evening.
Mr. Greigel, could you raise your right hand?
Yes,
You swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth.
I do.
I believe Mr. Greigel has been accepted as a professional planner before this board on prior occasions.
Yes, I
agree.
have. Thank you. It's clearing for this particular site a year or so ago.
Please
Can we
proceed.
unshare the screen, please?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Marinelli, can you unshare the screen?
Thank you.
Go
Jason,
ahead, Mr.
proceed.
Greigel.
Okay, Mr. Greigel, I'm assuming you're familiar with the site. Like you said, you testified in the fall for the temporary use permit, so I will turn the mic over to you.
Great, thank you. Good evening. The purpose of our review here in this application is again for this second phase, if you will, at least in my involvement for the use variance. So as such, I've reviewed the application and documents, visited the site and surrounding area, reviewed the township's master plan and zoning ordinance. As we've heard, the property is an existing developed site that's over 26 acres in the area. I won't belabor the details of the property. The board's been discussing it, is very familiar with it.
Thank
But
you,
just for
sir.
the record, the issue with regard to the uniqueness of the site is it has frontage on multiple streets, on Howard Street, South Avenue, Levgar Street, as well as the Lehigh Valley Railroad. And we have a variety of non-residential uses on it as well from the surrounding area. It is located in the M1 zone, the industrial district, which permits a wide range of non-residential uses, including all uses in the BP and LI1 zones. So we're talking about offices, manufacturing, warehousing, shipping and receiving, as well as other uses the Board of Adjustment may approve that are similar in character. However, we do have the requirement to get a use variance for this property for the current proposed uses, for the landscaping as well as other commercial uses. As we mentioned, there was temporary use variances granted previously. So now we're seeking to essentially formalize everything. The physical changes of the site are limited to what you've heard about already this evening. So I'll go right to the use variance proofs, then we can come back to any other issues that you like. In my opinion, as a planner, I believe that they can be addressed. As the board is, I'm sure, well aware, a use variance applicant needs to deal with both the positive and negative criteria. So the positive relates to the particular suitability of a site. That's one of a few different ways that you can demonstrate the positive criteria. In this case, I believe that is the instance. We also have to address the negative criteria that there's no substantial detriment to the public good or to the master plan or zoning ordinance. So I'll focus first on the positive criteria that we need to address. In my opinion, the subject property is certainly particularly suitable for the proposed uses, given the site's size, shape, arrangement, and location. It's 26 acres, has the street frontage, as I mentioned, as well as large interior areas. Having multiple access points allows for the variety of uses that exist and are proposed. That helps disperse traffic as well. In fact, one of these also, South Avenue, is a main road that is also characterized by other industrial uses. So from a land use character point of view, we certainly are dealing with a very similar type of set of uses. It also connects to the broader road network, South Avenue, so we have good access for the proposed mix of uses. The existing overall use of the property has been well established. We've heard that the township is very familiar with it. But we're also looking, though, to improve it, as has been discussed, through adding fencing and landscaping to help mitigate visual impacts. We're also limiting our physical changes to really improve the site within its setting. So I think for those reasons, the property is certainly particularly suitable for the use that's proposed and exists today. As to the negative criteria, again, this is relatively straightforward, I think, from a planning point of view, given all the testimony you've heard in the prior discussion of this site. I think there'd be no substantial detriments to the public good, given that the site's currently developed for the multiple uses, including those for which the variance is being sought. It's my understanding there's been no big issues with the operations on the site, but even where there have been any potential problems, we've been trying to address them and are looking to address them going forward through the mitigation that's been discussed with the township and as proposed this evening. And even though the uses are not maybe strictly permitted in the M1 zone, they're essentially the same in terms of layout and potential impacts. For that matter, again, neighboring properties are used to the property being developed with multiple similar commercial uses and industrial uses which are permitted in this zone. So I think by upgrading the parking design, improving the conditions on the property, adding landscaping and lighting and other improvements, there would be no substantial negative impacts. In fact, it'd be, I think, some positive impacts on the surrounding area, and to essentially formalize the arrangement and to improve its conditions. Lastly, in terms of the use variance, the zone plan and zone variance impacts, again, the M1 zone permits a range of uses that are essentially the same in terms of layout and potential impacts. The townships determine this is an appropriate location for industrial and commercial uses, and we're just simply looking to improve what you have there today. I think given the uniqueness of the site, its longstanding history, and the history of the applicant trying to improve it, I think that from a planning point of view, there'll be no substantial detrimental impacts on Piscataway's master plan or zoning efforts. So in summary, with regard to the use variance being sought, I believe it can be granted in accordance with the applicable criteria. Just briefly, if you like, Mr. Howard, we can deal with the C variances, but they're limited in nature. But I believe they can also be granted in accordance with the statutory criteria for C2 variances regarding the benefits outweighing the detriments and furthering the purposes of zoning. If you like, I can continue, or
Yeah, if you can touch upon those quickly, Mr. Bragel.
Yes, certainly. Again, the proposal is really limited to trying to improve what we have there today. So we're dealing with, for example, the fencing for 6-foot solid vinyl fencing, as opposed to 4 foot that's 50% solid. This is intended to provide better screening than with permitted fencing. Likewise, with regard to in terms of the site itself, we have multiple long front yards, so it is difficult to comply with the standard given the arrangement of the property. In terms of one other variance for parking area that we're looking to add stone trailer storage area, which essentially continue what exists in terms of the surfacing. That is the case that we will be continuing that and not looking to really expand the area greatly, but just to essentially better accommodate the use that's on the property. And then lastly, we have the issue of the parking stall size. With regard to that, the 9 by 18 spaces that are proposed are standard for residential uses statewide, but even also for pretty much all other uses other than high turnover retail. So I don't think there's any reason to provide larger spaces for the types of uses we have here. It would only increase paved area without any benefits. So I think in summary, again, those C2 variances can be granted under the applicable criteria.
Perfect. So just to sum everything up, in your professional opinion, does this application satisfy the necessary criteria for approval for the board for both use and bulk variance standards?
Yes, for the reasons I've stated and based on the prior testimony, yes, I do believe so.
Any questions, Mr. Gregor? Sorry, Mr. Cahill, I stepped on you.
That's okay. Does anyone on the board have any questions or comments?
Hey, Mr. Cahill,
This application right now.
I do have some questions. My questions would be regarding these landscaping uses. Nothing was really brought up about bulk storage or some materials that the landscape operations maintain on the premises. Do they have bulk storage, soil, mulch? I remember Diaz does tree removal. I think I don't see a real big issue with the uses other than the fact that I believe that, any type of bulk storage on the premises probably should be prohibited, should be limited to I think, material that are contained in bags. We don't need, I think, decaying mulch smells affecting the neighbors or again, it should be disposed of by these tree companies in an appropriate manner, not brought to the site to be stockpiled. And those would be my, I think, biggest concerns, is that, any palleted or bulk storage be contained in bags, limited in height to, I think, the same height as a trailer, or any limitations that perhaps some of the other tenants like the Abbey Brick Company may have, but not have bulk storage on the premises.
Is that okay?
Okay, Mr. Hinterstein, I don't believe there's currently any bulk storage going on. I know that Diaz may keep their mulch in some dump trailers or in containers, but no piles as far as I know. I don't believe that's what the site's ever been used for. It's mostly garage and for their equipment, with then, like I said, the mulch in trailers.
Okay. You wouldn't have a problem with that being a condition of the approval, correct?
I don't believe so.
Great.
Mr. Hinterstein, if I may, two of the conditions of the previous approval were exactly that no outdoor storage of wood chips or paving material piles would be permitted, and any storage piles would be limited to the 12 and a half feet or the height of a trailer. So that we would be consistent with that previous approval.
Okay.
Great. Any
So
other
are
members?
you proposing bulk storage in piles up to 12 and a half feet on the ground?
Well, I think Mr. Hinterstein spoke to Abbey Hart has bulk materials, including block and brick, stored outside. So this isn't pile. We would not have piles of loose materials, including mulch or wood chips, or pavement, millings of asphalt, things of that nature. But there is bulk storage of materials that exist on site and have for the last 20 years, with limitations on height.
So, Mr. Hinterstein, are you suggesting that the bulk storage of mulch be limited to in trailers only, but otherwise they could store it on the ground up to 12 and a half feet?
No, I'm saying there should be no loose material storage on the ground. Only material that could be stacked, block, bag material, stuff that could be palletized, Even when I say loose, I mean, you know, as was described, soil, fill, things of that nature, salt. That could be either in bags or in trailers or some type of containers.
But you're
So-
okay with block?
Yes, I'm okay with most typical bulk materials, as long as they're not loose in nature, like was stated, piles of stone, blacktop, mulch, wood chips, things of that nature, because that could decompose.
So Mr. Keneally and Mr. Gale, the applicant is fine with that. We understand, and Mr. Keneally will work on any resolution language if necessary that's satisfactory to the board.
Sounds good.
Does that include the language that Mr. Chadwick used about the liquid materials?
Yes, that would be included. Yes.
Yes.
It would be, okay. Any other members of the board have any questions for this application? Hearing none, I'm going to open it to the public. Anyone in the public portion have any questions about this particular application?
No one,
No.
Chairman.
No one? Okay, we're going to close the public portion, and I would make a motion to approve this application with the language put forward by Henry Hinterstein and John Chadwick. Can I get a second? Please
There's
call the roll.
there's one item,
Go,
Mr.
John.
Chairman. The prior resolutions, you're not asking to modify any of those conditions, correct?
I'm sorry, John, can you say that again?
In the prior resolutions of approval for the various, either site plan or temporary use or what have you, you're not asking to modify any of those conditions, correct?
Those conditions remain in full force and effect unless specifically changed by this application.
Okay, and they didn't offer anything to that extent, then, as I get it, other than the fence.
Mr. Marinelli, I'll defer to you on that with respect to the technical nature.
No, we didn't provide any testimony to change any of the conditions of the prior approval.
Okay,
My approval still is on the board. Did Mr. DeCalpish second?
Yes, you did.
Good, let's call the roll.
Mr. Weissman,
Yes.
Mr. Tillery,
Yes.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Reggio,
Yes.
Mr. Blount,
yes.
Mr. Hidaka,
Yes.
and Chairman Cahill.
Yes.
We will memorialize this approval at our next meeting in a couple of weeks, and I'll be in touch with you over certain language to discuss for the resolution.
Thanks, Mr. Keneally.
Have a great night, gentlemen.
Thank you, board.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Let's move along to item number 11, 22-ZB-11/12V, DF Osborne Construction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Bonner from the firm of Javerbam, Wargaff, et cetera. We're here tonight for a preliminary and final site plan approval, which will include continuation of existing bulk variances and new variances related to the charging station installation as permitted accessory structures. Property is located in the SC Shopping Center zone, and it is currently operated as a shopping center by Kimco. The applicant plans to install a transformer, charging stations, power cabinets, switchgear, signage, and to reconfigure 4 parking spaces. Reconfigure the parking so there are 4 designated EV charging stations. They'll be relocating 1 light pole, which is near the equipment, adding some landscaping and screening of the equipment being installed. And I would point out that this use is permitted per New Jersey statute and your local ordinance as a permitted accessory use. Before I get to our witnesses, I would like to mention that we received a staff report and then a revised staff report last month, just before the meeting. And we elected to adjourn as we tried to get Kimco and the township to work out a couple of the issues that were mentioned in Mr. Hinterstein's report. Those 2 issues are construction of a sidewalk and I guess rejuvenation of some of the landscaping on the site. It's our understanding that Kimco has been in touch with the township and they have again, we're being told by Kimco that they worked out an understanding that the landscaping could be taken care of within the next year. The sidewalk issue is a much larger consideration. It's not part of their capital budget for this year, but they are working with an engineer and with the local utility companies because there's a possibility that some items might have to be relocated, but they're willing to sit down with the township and work out the details of a schedule to put that sidewalk in the future, but they can't commit to a timeline right now. After our witnesses, we do have a representative of Kimco on the call tonight if you had any questions for him regarding what I've just stated. I would like to introduce, we have 3 witnesses tonight. We have a representative of the applicant, Mr. Stephen Osborne. We have the surveyor of the property, and we have a professional planner. Mr. Keneally, we can swear them all now, or we can do them one at a time, whatever.
I'll go one at a time. Who do you want to call first?
Okay, our first would be Jim Watson, the surveyor on the property. And I see him on the screen.
Mr. Watson, can you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Your name and address, please.
Sure. James Watson, EKA Associates, 328 Park Avenue, Scotch Plains, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Can you go through your qualifications, Jim, and
Sure.
describe your familiarity with the work you did on the site?
Yeah, not a problem. I'm a licensed professional land surveyor in the state of New Jersey as well as New York. In addition to that, I'm a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey. Appointed positions over the years, I've been the planner for the Borough of Carteret, the Township of Union, and the public advocate of the Township of Warren. I've appeared probably, last count was over 1,100 times. I've never been turned down as an expert. Familiar with Mr. Chadwick.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Mr. Watson can.
Mr. Watson's credentials are perfect. Well,
Thank you.
please proceed.
Thank you.
Rather than ask Mr. Watson questions, I will let him describe the existing site and what the plans are in the area that's affected by our application.
Sure. If I can, I'd like to share my screen, see if I can get the sheet 3 up of the site plan. That's probably the easiest thing to talk with. Okay.
Go ahead.
There we go. Come on. Oh, there it is. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
This is sheet 3 in the site plan application. It's probably just easier to have a picture and just leave it here. Tonight's application is at Piscataway Town Center. It's 9.57 acres in the SC zone, as Mr. Bonner alluded to. We're on the southeast corner of Centennial and Washington Avenues. In this strip mall, for lack of a better word, ShopRite is the main anchor store, and it's flanked by the Applebee's and the Smash Burger. We are near the Applebee's restaurant. You can see part of the building to the east of where the proposed parking stalls are proposed. The site we're discussing tonight is located in the westerly corner of the property and is visible from Washington Avenue. We're restriping and adding about 100 square feet of pavement, and that's down in this area here where my cursor is. There's a hatched area. And the reason we're doing that is because of the handicap accessibility. We're sliding the paved area down so that we can get the same number of parking spaces that are there now, which is 13. The project consists of 4 charging stations in front of 4 parking spaces, 1 handicap accessible spaces there. We have 1 transformer pad proposed and a switching pad with associated landscaping and lighting. The new variances that come along with this application are all for the switch gear and the like. We're asking for front yard setback variances for the switch gear, the transformer, and the charging stations. And we're also asking for a side yard setback for the transformer. There was some questions and some discussion.
Excuse me, Mr. Watson, but just to be clear, none of the existing variances are being affected by our installation, correct?
Correct. Nothing is changing. The number of parking spaces remains the same before and after this application goes through.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Sure. We had a couple of rounds of discussions about where to put this. There was some discussion about the orientation of some things. Basically, we set this whole thing up to avoid a multitude of easements that are in the area. That's the reason the transformer pad is angled as it is, because it's parallel with the easements. There's a Verizon easement. There's also a gas easement and utilities in the area, and everything is parallel with this pad. That's why we oriented it the way we did. Also, there's some floodplain issues out there. We did this to keep mainly everything we're doing out of a floodway, which is on South Washington Avenue and wraps around the southwesterly portion of our property and goes along the back of this strip mall. We also wanted to keep it away from the main mall building and close to accessible power supply. Unfortunately, we left off the pole location when we showed this, but there is a main power pole that's right in this area that we're going to use for our power. We also didn't want to be intrusive to the businesses in the center. Sometimes you'll see malls have these charging stations right up front or on the outskirts, right near the main entrances. We wanted to push this off to the side. And one of the benefits is it's visible from South Washington Avenue. With that being said, it's also a plus, and the planner will touch on this. People can come here and access the site just for the charging station. While they're waiting, they can make use of the mall. So it's a benefit for the mall and the businesses in the mall itself. With that, that's basically what we're doing. If you have questions about what you see.
One thing, Jim, in the
Sure.
Staff report memorandum and revised memorandum, there was mention of the pole that will be added. The relocation of that pole will be added to the final plans, correct?
Correct.
And I don't think there was anything else in the staff report that had to do with the plans other than possibly the landscape buffering and adding some maybe additional plantings around the equipment.
Yeah, and we can work with your professionals. We'll put in whatever you need. It's not a big deal. It's a small, we're just trying to screen this thing as much as possible so it's not an eyesore.
And I believe in Mr. Chadwick's report, he mentioned that there's an ID sign shown in the construction details that's not shown on the plans. That will be added in the final plans too, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing further for Mr. Watson.
Do any of the members of the board have any questions for Mr. Watson? No questions?
Briefly, do you know the size of these pieces of equipment?
We have a representative of the applicant who will be able to give that type of testimony.
Okay.
Okay, you can proceed with your next witness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
All right,
Our next witness is Stephen Osborne, principal of the applicant and the contractor for this project. So he will do the same thing that Mr. Watson did and make a nice narrative presentation. And we'll leave him open to the board. Mr. Keneally, would you like to swear him in?
Yes, Mr. Osborne, can you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes.
Your name and address, please.
Briefly state your position with the company, that you're familiar with this project and what your role is in the application.
Okay, could we get his name and address, please?
I apologize.
My name is Stephen Osborne. I am the president of DF Osborne Construction in Topeka, Kansas. The address is 3310 Southwest Topeka Boulevard in Topeka, Kansas.
And you are familiar with this project and you've done numerous installations of this type around the country, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct. I have been involved and heavily engaged in the infrastructure upgrades for electric vehicle charging projects all over the country. I am personally licensed professionally through the National Association of State Contractor licensing in about 20 states, and I have various state and local licensure in another 10 states. So we're currently operating in about 30 states. I have personally overseen the installation of over 600 DC fast charging stations like we'll be talking about tonight, or DC fast chargers. And this year alone, we are contracted to install roughly 400 more in multiple states.
Including New Jersey.
including New Jersey, many in New Jersey. So it's a wonderful growth. I'm very excited. This is the future. We're right on the cutting edge here. So I'm very excited, and I appreciate you having me here. And I do very much appreciate your service to your community as a serving your community. That means a lot to me. And so thank you for having me here.
Why don't you tell us about the project, describe the machines, how they are operated, maintained, their size for Mr. Chadwick.
Sure. And if it's okay, I'd like to share my screen here and show you a picture of a rendering of what this site will look like. There we go. So hopefully you can see my screen here.
Okay, let me ask you if this has been submitted as part of the application package, or we need to mark this separately?
It has not. I don't believe that it has, so we might as well mark it, Mr. Keneally.
Okay, so this will be marked as A1 with today's date, and you'll have to supply a paper copy to the board.
Okay, we can do that. This is a typical site that we've been installing in multiple areas. This one, as discussed just previously with the prior witness, took a lot of planning to get this one placed just right so that we maintain certain clearances. We have, this is for the company EVgo Incorporated. They are a national provider of electric vehicle charging. One interesting note here is they found that 8 out of 10 of their survey respondents indicate they shop while they charge. These are the high-powered DC fast chargers. So I certainly don't want to insult anyone's intelligence here, but just quick educational on this. You have 3 types of chargers. You have a level 1 home charger that might take 6 to 12 hours to charge. You have level 2 convenience chargers that might be at a doctor's office or hospital. Those are more the 3 to 4 hour plus chargers. And then you have your DC fast chargers like we're discussing here today. And these can charge, depending on the car, depending on the capacity, can charge a vehicle anywhere from 15 minutes to maybe an hour. Now, electric vehicle charging users, they operate very differently. You're not in very good shape if you run out of battery on the side of the road. You can't walk to the gas station. So EV charger or charging drivers, electric car drivers, they're utilizing stations like this by convenience. They're going into an Applebee's, which I believe is right next to this, having their meal, and when they come out, their car is charged up and ready to go. So they're not really delaying any more than normal for normal parking. These are UL certified pieces of equipment. For those of you who may not be completely familiar, this is the Underwriter Laboratories. It is the oldest safety standards company in the United States. Very, very high, very strict safety standards, and we completely comply with UL safety standards. You'll also notice in the middle of the screen, we have a nice light here. We have a few different types of light fixtures we like to use. It's based on inventory. Right now we have a lot of supply chain issues, as I'm sure you're aware, but the ones that we use are, generally speaking, a dark sky downward lighting LED fixture. So it illuminates just this site here. We have a good diffusion on them, and we're not illuminating buildings or disturbing any neighboring areas. So it creates a nice safe place for drivers to come in here while they're going in and shopping. They can park and charge their vehicle up very quickly. As you can see from these vehicles, chargers here, a typical parking stall, and I don't have the plans right in front of me, but a typical parking stall is about 9 feet wide. The physical chargers are about 2 foot by 2 foot square, and they'll stand about 5, maybe 6 feet tall. So roughly the size of a large adult, maybe. And then there's 2 smaller dispensers here that stand about maybe 4 foot tall, so a little bit shorter here. We also, behind this equipment, this charging equipment, we have what we call a DC or AC to DC inverter or power cabinet and a switch gear. And off to the left, we have a utility transformer. Now, there has been a utility pole that was set. It was placed by the utility company after the surveys were done. And that pole is just right over here, and it's in line with several other poles in the area. We do propose to have landscape screening This is what it would look like essentially right after construction, but as that landscaping fills out, you really wouldn't see more than just the tops of this equipment at best. We do have, we're very proud of our finishing crews, and we are installers as well, and our finishing crews come in and perform just incredible line striping, seal coating, and cleanup of the site. So the reality is this is what the site will look like when it's done, even though this is just a rendering. It'll really look beautiful when it's finished.
And Stephen, and just to confirm something that Mr. Watson spoke about,
yes, sir.
The location of the equipment was largely dictated by the number of easements running through the area.
It was, yeah, it was actually very difficult to find this exact spot here. And we were down to essentially inches, making sure that this one fits inside of existing easements. And we found that this was a very, just a perfect spot right here. It's not intrusive. It doesn't really create an eyesore. It's a nice little spot for the equipment. And it does need to be close to the chargers. These power cabinets need to be close to the chargers for, so we don't have a significant voltage drop. It is important to note that EVgo as a network is committed to a 98% uptime across their entire network. So they want less than 2% downtime. And we also use local electricians to support us in the installs of these. So if there was an emergency, if there was downtime, we're able to get them back up pretty quickly. So from a safety standpoint, we don't really find that there's any danger to the public. We have utility vehicle warning bollards that are placed right in front of the chargers here for car strike protection. We do have signs that are placed. They're kind of a dark blue, so they're not intrusive or anything. They're subtle, just identifying the location. But this is a nationally accepted equipment layout, types of equipment used across many providers. And personally, I think EVgo has one of the more beautiful layouts on these. They are also ADA compliant. The screen sizes and the placement of the chargers away from the curb are ADA compliant. And we have ADA compliant stall spacing here, which is also a van accessible compliance. So there's been just countless hours poured into this site specifically. It's, I think, laid out by some very intelligent individuals. And we're just really excited to get in on this project here soon.
Excuse me, what's the difference between the two smaller charging units and the two taller ones?
Sure. So the two smaller charging units are 100 kilowatt chargers, and they have internal AC to DC inverters. And so they feed from the transformer to our switchgear and directly to the chargers. These slightly slimmer but taller chargers are 350 kilowatt chargers, and they feed each from a power cabinet. So they're providing 3.5 times as much juice, if you will, for charging a vehicle. Very, very quick charging here. This would be common for somebody that's just running into a store for a quick grab something for 10 minutes and back out, and they're probably going to get about a 50% charge on their battery, and off they go. These 100 kWs might be more appropriate for somebody going in to grab lunch, maybe taking a little bit more time with their shopping.
Okay. So, thank you.
Anything else, Stephen?
No, the only other thing that a lot of people ask us is how long will it take to get them installed? And from the time I receive a formal notice to proceed, our construction schedules are typically about 30 days. So other than a construction fence up for a little bit of an eyesore there, they're very, very quick installations, and we're done and gone. And people can start charging pretty quickly.
Okay. Thank you. I have no questions for Mr.
No
Osborne.
problem. Any members of the board have any questions for this witness? Hearing none, please proceed to your last witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next next witness is Nicholas Graviano, professional planner in New Jersey. Where's Nick? There he is.
Mr. Graviano, could you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
I do.
Your name and address, please.
Yes, my first name is Nicholas with an H, last name Graviano, G-R-A, V as in Victor, I-A-N-O, with a business address of 101 Crawford's Corner Road in Holmdel, New Jersey.
Have you appeared before the Piscataway zoning board before as a planner?
Yes, I have.
I believe you have, and your credentials remain unchanged?
Yes, I am still currently licensed in the state of New Jersey. I last appeared before this board in relation to an application at 44 Stelton Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you can be accepted.
Credentials are fine. Let's proceed, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The previous engineer and the applicant did a great job of describing the background of the site. I'll keep it basic. The applicant is requesting preliminary and final site plan approval for a specific piece of property, otherwise known as Block 5601, Lot 1.02, with an address of 1280 Centennial Avenue. As Mr. Watson indicated, this is an existing shopping center with a mix of uses that you customarily see in a shopping center, such as a grocery store, other restaurant and personal service type uses. You heard the applicant and the engineer describe the improvements on site. They're relatively modest. The goal is to install transformers, charging stations, power cabinets, switchgear, and to reconfigure some parking spaces in a very limited area of the existing parking lot. It is roughly a 10-acre site, so as you can see, this does not occupy a large portion of the site. Electric vehicle charging stations are an inherently beneficial use, so that they've been deemed to promote the general welfare of the community. The township requires them by ordinance, and as you all know, there's now state regulations that mandate the installation of electric vehicle charging stations on new projects. There are numerous existing bulk variances on the site which are not augmented by this application. They're not being changed, specifically with lot area, front yard setback, rear yard setback, building coverage, and a number of parking spaces. There are the existing variances on site. What the applicant is proposing are variances for the charging stations and the equipment. Specifically, the front yard setback for accessory structures requires variances ranging from 11.83 feet to 30.92 feet. Those are the charging stations. 100% is required. Additionally, there's another side yard accessory structure variance, whereas 50 feet is required and 18 is proposed. That is for a transformer as well. These variances certainly can be granted under both the C1 and C2 criteria. In terms of the C1 criteria, you heard Mr. Watson indicate that there are a bunch of easements that are affecting the property. It was very difficult to find a suitable location for the equipment. Additionally, the existing parking field does not meet ordinance standards, although it's enough parking to service the needs of the shopping center. Certainly, with respect to the C1 criteria, there are extraordinary situations affecting the specific piece of property, and the granting of those variances can be done under the C1 criteria without substantial impairment to the zone plan or zoning ordinance. They can be also granted under the C2 criteria, whereas hardship need not be demonstrated, which must show is that the application relates to a specific piece of property. Here you have an existing shopping center without electric vehicle charging stations, which are now mandated and have gained currency since the construction of the shopping center. While this is an inherently beneficial use, which in its own right satisfies the positive criteria, I would just like to note that this application does in its own right advance purposes of zoning in the municipal land use law, specifically Purpose A, municipal action guiding the appropriate use of land in a manner which will promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. We have the electric vehicle charging stations themselves, which of course improve regional air quality, reduce petroleum usage, and mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. It promotes green economy and clean technology and infrastructure. But as Mr. Watson said in his testimony, it also helps the general welfare in that, in the struggling brick and mortar retail economy sector, it certainly gets people to the site and provides them time to enjoy the shopping centers, restaurants, or other retail stores or personal service establishments. Additionally, advances purpose G, sufficient space and appropriate location for variety of commercial uses to meet the needs of New Jersey citizens. This is certainly needed in this shopping center. Lastly, it helps advance purpose I, desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. And it's good civic design and arrangement to have these type of facilities in shopping centers. There's certainly not a substantial impairment to the zone plan or zoning ordinance with granting these variances under the C2 criteria. And additionally, it advances items in the master plan, the 2020 reexamination specifically, calls for the reduction of the use of carbon-based fuels for the encouragement of renewable energy resources and the use of electric and hybrid vehicles. The master plan also states that the township now mandates electric car charging stations by ordinance. And additionally, the master plan says that the continued use of renewable energy sources in the township will help to serve the reduction of the dependence of non-renewable energy sources such as gas and oil. So with all those factors combined and the relatively modest nature of these variances, I believe that they could be granted under both C1 and C2 criterias without substantial impairment to the zone plan, zoning ordinance, and without substantial detriment to the public good. The applicant is proposing an extensive landscape package to shield any of the associated equipment to the charging stations from public view.
Thank you, Mr. Graviano. I have no further questions for Mr. Graviano. I would like to make a short statement before the board opens to the public, but if you have any questions for Mr. Graviano, go ahead.
That's my job. Does anyone on the board have any questions or comments for Mr. Graviano? Okay. please,
But
Mr.
Mr. Cahill, real quick,
and-
Mr. Cahill. I know that the issue about the sidewalk and the landscaping was brought up. He said he's under discussions with the township. I'm not aware of any. So to that extent, I still feel that any approval should be conditioned upon the sidewalk and the satisfaction of the replacement of landscaping from the original approvals. That I could be more than happy to work on or work out with the applicant. And as far as the sidewalk, that could be conditioned, and if the township administration has, been working on an agreement, perhaps the resolution could state that timing will be based on, as approved by the administration as far as the timing goes for the installation of that sidewalk.
I agree. Anyone else on the board have any questions or comments?
Sean, I have one quick question. Henry, they show one single plant type around the two equipment sites. Don't we usually want to get a variety?
I'm sorry, John, I missed the beginning of
They
that.
show one single plant type as the buffering to.
Yeah, I think my
we gotta-
comment was, my comment was I wasn't satisfied with the proposed landscaping that they were providing anyway, so that would have to get worked out.
Okay.
And I would have to look at that and approve that. Yeah, it definitely wasn't
Is that
satisfactory.
agreed to? Michael, is that agreed to?
The applicant's willing to work with the
Fine,
township's professionals on the types of plantings around the equipment.
Awesome.
thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bonner, you can have your closing argument.
I want to thank you for your time. I think we made a compelling case for the approval of this application. But I would ask that if the board is inclined to make the sidewalk and the landscape a condition of approval, that they carry this matter, because that is not something that the applicant himself is willing to undertake. As I explained, this is the landlord's responsibility, and the cost of putting in a sidewalk would overwhelm this project. It would be in excess of the entire cost of the project. The applicant, the landlord has represented to us that they've spoken to people in the township. As I mentioned, there's a representative on tonight. He's the one I spoke with earlier today. So I would say that if you're inclined to put a condition of approval on this applicant, that this be carried so that the landlord has time to work it out. We would be willing to accept conditions that the landlord act in good faith to work these issues out with the township, but not the applicant. Thank you.
Mr. Keneally?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you have two options here. You can either carry the matter if you're inclined to impose those conditions as the applicant requested, or you can impose the conditions on the applicant, not on the landlord, because the landlord is not before the board. You could impose those conditions on the applicant, and the applicant would either have to comply with those conditions or come back to the board for relief from a condition if those circumstances changed.
Let me ask Mr. Keneally if it would be possible, if there's a way to construct the resolution to impose the conditions over a certain period of time, but not impede the applicant's ability to go ahead with construction of its project.
As I understand it, the conditions have to be satisfied before the CO is issued.
Then my understanding from my client is that they would, and Stephen, you can speak to this as well, that they would rather that this matter be carried and the landlord have time to work these issues out with the township, because they're not the applicant's responsibility.
I would be in agreement to carrying this until the landlord had the opportunity to address this with the township.
Stephen, do you agree with me? To carry?
I do.
Okay, and Mr. Bonner, how long a period of time are you requesting the board to carry it?
If he is still on, there's Jay Adams. I don't know if he's still here. He was here before. He's a representative of Kimco. Jay, would you maybe fill us in on the conversations that have been had between Kimco and the township and where you're going and how long you think it might take?
I need to swear him in.
I apologize, Mr. Keneally.
Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes, sir.
Your name and address, please.
Before
Jay Adams.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Wouldn't it make more sense to just strike 6 months? They get it worked out in 5 days, great. But just do it, because to know what the activity is taking place right now could change tomorrow. There's still
and I would add to that, Mr. Chadwick, that I believe it would be acceptable to the applicant to put a time limit on as long as there were a built-in extension if it weren't worked out. Jay, do you have any comment?
We would be amenable to that, to 6 months with a built-in extension.
Okay. Let's do that.
Okay, so we're not going to include an automatic extension, but the board would, if in 6 months you notify the board that you would like an extension, it would be granted as long as it appears that all of the parties are cooperating.
Thank you. And the condition, so we're clear, the condition in the resolution would be that the application would be approved subject to the condition that within 6 months, whether it's the applicant or the landlord, works out the sidewalk and landscaping issues with the township.
Perfect.
So you're asking the board to vote on this tonight?
With the 6 months, subject to extension, yes.
Okay, with an agreement that the condition is that the landscaping and sidewalk be resolved within 6 months, or you come back to the board.
That's, yes, as long as it's not necessarily attributable to the applicant, but that it be resolved, whether it's with the landlord or the applicant.
Well, I believe the board is looking at a condition that requires the applicant to take care of the landscaping and the sidewalk. And if the applicant can get the landlord to take care of the sidewalk, that's not our problem.
First of all, I would point out, somebody's got their hand raised. I'm not sure what that is about.
We have not opened to the public yet.
Okay, could I ask for about 5 minutes so we could get on a quick conference call and I could discuss this with my client and our team?
Mr. Chairman, do you want to take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, let's take a 5-minute recess.
Thank you.
No more than 5 though, please.
No,
Okay,
we'll
so
be
this
right
matter
back.
will be
Thank you.
adjourned for 5 minutes. Please, everybody be back in 5 minutes. Unless he agrees. Well, he wasn't agreeing to target, and then he asked for a vote. I'm like, I'll talk to you again tonight.
We're back?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are.
Hold on. Let's make sure Laura Buckley is here.
Gee, unmute, there she goes.
I'm ready. We're recording.
Okay. Now
Thank
we're
you.
ready.
I spoke to the applicant and they would prefer to take a 30-day carry, if that's okay with the board, and see where Kimco gets in 30 days and come back, report to the board, and request a vote at that time if the issue has been resolved.
So you're asking for an adjournment to the second meeting. Do we have a second meeting in
No.
July?
And we're already packed in July. You could do August
We'd be
11th.
looking for.
We have 9
30
applications on in July already.
The end of July?
We only have one meeting.
Only have
One
one
meeting.
meeting in July.
Okay,
One in
so,
August, one in July. It'd be next available would be August 11th.
okay. Gives us a little bit of extra time.
Yeah, and it's not really that much extra time. So you're willing to go to August 11th?
August 11th, yes, Mr. Keneally.
Okay.
I don't, if the board requires an extension of time, we're willing to grant that. I haven't looked at the date, but Laura, you can let us know.
If you do, yeah, I'll email it to you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, do I open it to the public now or wait till? August?
Thank you. It's your choice, Mr. Chairman. It sounds like there's additional information that may be coming. So if so, you may want to hold off until.
I'm going to hold off on the public portion until the next time we get together. So, all right, so we're going to carry this. I'll move on to the next application.
Thank you all for your
announce a
time.
new date. So this matter is going to be carried to August 11th, 2022, with no further notice by the applicant. The only notice you're receiving is my announcement here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you
Have
in
a good night.
August.
Thank you.
Let's move on to item number 12, 22-ZB-7-23V, Mark Bana.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board and board professionals. My name is Tim Arch. I'm an attorney licensed in the state of New Jersey. First, let me say I appreciate your efficiencies tonight, and I will try my best to follow suit. I am here representing Mark Bana. He is the owner of 1790 West 7th Street. You probably know it better as the former Arbor Rescue Squad site. I'm going to assume that the board is quite familiar with that site, as it's been around for, I'm just going to say forever. So I don't think we have to go into too many details about the site. Just for general housekeeping, I would ask Mr. Keneally if we have proper jurisdiction in front of the board.
Yes, Mr. Arch, the notice was proper and the board has jurisdiction to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Keneally. We have four reports or memos that I have in my possession. One is Mr. Chadwick's report dated May 27th, 2022. One is Mr. Hinterstein's report dated June 23rd, 2022. I have a DPW report that indicates no comment, and I have Ms. Corcoran's list of applicable variances. That's from February 11th, 2022. I don't believe there are any additional reports that I'm missing. I would just ask for confirmation.
I'm not aware of any.
Thank you. We are here tonight seeking use variance relief in order to have a wrestling club with a weightlifting or weight gym component associated with that, as well as storage of personal vehicles in the garage section of the building and of the site. In addition to that, there's several bulk variances and existing nonconformities on the site. I'll note that all of those are, just as I said, existing nonconformities. We are not proposing any additions that will affect those existing nonconformities. Again, they've been around forever. I do have 3 witnesses tonight. And my first witness is Mr. Mark Bana, who is the owner of the property. I would ask that he come forward to be sworn.
Mr. Bana, can you raise your right hand?
Yes, I can.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes, sir.
Your name and address, please.
Mark Bana, 561 Johnston Drive, Watchung, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Mr. Bana, you are the owner of the former Arbor Rescue site, 1790 West 7th Street. Is that correct?
Yes.
And approximately how long have you owned that?
8 months, 9 months, something like that.
So you purchased it in 2021?
Yes.
And when you purchased it, all of these bulk variances and nonconformities in terms of setbacks and the radio antenna that's present there, those were all present when you purchased the property. You didn't add them, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And what you're here tonight, the main crux of what we're looking for tonight is to use the property for a wrestling club. There's also a weightlifting component to that. And there is a garage storage component. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. If I could just share my screen real quick, I think it'll help with the with my questioning. So Mr. Bonner, this is a floor plan of the site, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And when we're talking about using the site for a wrestling training gym, that would be that section, this large section here that I'm highlighting. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay. And the weightlifting component that I'm talking about, that's located here in this section that's marked gym. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. And then again, there is this 3-bay garage where I'm assuming the Arbor Rescue Squad had their vehicles. It's a 3-bay garage that's over here on this side. That's where we're talking about the storage of your personal vehicles. Is that
yes,
correct?
yes.
Okay. Now, in terms of the ability or the suitability of this site to those uses, you've actually, before you knew that you needed a use variance for this site, the wrestling squad was actually operating in there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you personally had occasion to see the usage of the site and see how it was operating, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And during that time period that it was operating there, there were no issues in terms of parking, in terms of overflow parking or anything along those lines?
no, no
Okay.
problem.
To your knowledge, there had always been adequate parking there for all the activities that were going on that we're presenting tonight. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. As far as, and we're going to hear more about the wrestling program from our next witness, so I don't want to belabor the point too much at this time. But one of the conditions that were listed in Mr. Hinterstein's memo was a possible restriction on the hours of usage and the overall number of members of the club. And you have no issue, obviously, with conforming to that, as long as the tenant is also okay with that, who will be testifying in a moment. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So let's talk about the car storage over here. So this is a 3-bay garage that is approximately 1,700 square feet. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. And what you're looking to put there is your personal vehicles. You collect basically collector cars. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay. Now, whenever anybody hears garage or when you think about garage, the first thing that comes to mind is mechanics garage, doing oil changes, pneumatic air compressor tools, and all those sorts of things. We're not looking to have a mechanics garage there. Is that correct?
No, only
Okay.
my personal vehicles, yes.
Okay. We're not looking to do any vehicle repairs there or modifications or anything along those lines. Is that correct?
No,
Okay. And I want to be clear. We are only asking for passive, static storage of motor vehicles in that garage, correct?
yes,
Okay. You're not asking to store them outdoors or out front or anything like that. It's in the garage just to utilize that space.
yes,
Okay. Now, if you weren't allowed to do that, you would have essentially a 1,700 square foot dead space in this building that isn't being utilized by the potential other uses in that building. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay. And if the board were to look favorably on this application and the board were concerned about the possibility of this going beyond just normal car storage there, you would be agreeable to restrictions where there wouldn't be any repairs, there wouldn't be anything more than just storage of your personal cars. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you understand that that would be enforceable and that the town would certainly enforce that if they were to look favorably on that on this application, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mark, we went through the reports in the memorandum, specifically on Mr. Hinterstein's memorandum. He did indicate under site impact, I think approximately 11 different comments about improvements to the site overall. You've had an opportunity to look at those and we've discussed those, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And you agree to all of those comments and conditions that Mr. Hinterstein indicated about repairing, restriping, providing more landscape, all those conditions outlined in his report, correct?
That's fine, yes.
Okay. And that also includes the state requirement for a single make-ready EV charger there.
Yes.
You would apply, you would, obviously you have to, it's a state statute. Okay. I have no further direct at this time. I would ask, or Mr. Bonner is available for questioning to the board.
Well, Mr. Bonner, let me ask you a question. Since in the 8 months since you acquired that property, was the 3 bays being used for automotive repair?
I had some vehicles in there, yes, that I changed some oil and stuff on them, yes.
Okay,
I
and
don't have to
you
do
doing it by yourself, or you had hired people or family
I
members?
don't
Or
have anyone hired.
okay,
I
so
had, yeah, just me and my son, and once in a while a friend of his would help him with some stuff. That was it.
okay, and that would cease obviously
I could cease that, yes.
if this was okay.
Mr. Banner.
Anyone else on the board have any questions? Go ahead, Henry.
Mr. Cahill. Mr. Banner, I was by the site today and there was full-blown mechanic work going on in the garage. So,
And I
you know,
mean,
vehicles in the bays, mechanics or people working on them.
that was
Vehicles
my
outside,
yeah.
some without license plates. Some look like they were, you know, half worked on. So you're saying this is, you know, this work is stopped, but I was out there today and it was going on.
I probably had some stuff going on in there today, but I could cease to do that if that's what, you know.
And to be clear, Mr. Hinterstein, when we did get your report today, we went through it, and I think the pledge that Mr. Bonner is making is that if this is looked favorably upon and approved, it will absolutely cease going forward. This wasn't an indication that it hadn't been going on before, but that it absolutely.
Even if the application is not approved, it's got to cease going on.
Yeah.
Well, correct,
It's
obviously.
in violation. The other issue that wasn't brought up in the staff report is that somebody had painted these garage doors with some logos and like, I don't know whether it's vehicles or mechanic type stuff, but any approval, regardless of if vehicles or parking is allowed or not, those garage doors should be painted a neutral color. There's no logos, no identification or any type of anything that should be on those doors. That's basically akin to a sign that no application has been provided for any signage. And so those doors should be returned to just a neutral color, solid color, without any logos or writing on them.
Okay, that's not a problem.
Anyone else have any questions? Hearing none. Please proceed, Mr. Hodge.
Thank you. Our next witness would be Mr. Donnie D. Philippus. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He can correct me if I did that incorrectly, but he is available for swearing in.
Sir, could you swear, raise your right hand? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give to be the truth? If you answered, I could not hear you.
Yeah, we didn't hear you, Donnie.
I do. I do.
Okay.
Mr. D. Philippus, you are, first of all, am I pronouncing that correct?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, let's get his name and address, please, Mr. Arch.
Oh, sorry.
My name is Donnie D. Philippus. I live at 17 Yale Street in Summit, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Mr. D. Philippus, you are the owner of Yale Wrestling Club, is that correct?
Yale Street Wrestling Club, yes.
Yale Street Wrestling Club. In addition to that, you're also a Summit police officer, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. If you could just do it audibly. You are looking to be the prospective tenant in this former Arbor Rescue building. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And in fact, before Mr. Bonner and yourself were aware that a use variance was required, you actually had already operated out of this site. Is that correct?
Yes, for approximately 3 months.
Okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Yale Street Wrestling Club is and sort of what you do there or what you want to do?
Okay, we've been operating since 2013. We started in my garage. We outgrew my garage. We went to a building in Scotch Plains, and we since have outgrown that. We work with kids all the way from the ages from 5 all the way up to college. And again, we've been operating since 2013. We've put kids into college that have wrestled on the Division I level, and we continue to work with children of all ages.
And now that 3 months that you were operating out of the building, in terms of site circulation or parking, did you have any issues with having adequate parking there for all of your events? Not events, but coaching, class training.
No, we did not. Our site in Scotch Plains on Route 22 actually had less parking than what was available in Piscataway, and we never really had an issue in Scotch Plains, and the way we operated in Piscataway was very comfortable.
Okay. Now, as part of what you're doing there, you're proposing that you're going to do this club with training and essentially classes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You're not proposing any sort of meets or any sort of spectator events to draw people in. No. And in fact, any sort of meets or any sort of events like that you do that off-site at another location. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And in terms of scheduling your classes, if the board were to look favorably on the application and impose essentially a time limit that you would have to work around, if you wouldn't have any classes after 9 p.m., would that be acceptable?
That would be very acceptable. Yes,
Perhaps we can ask what exactly the proposed hours are.
Certainly. Mr. DeFilippis, tell us when your earliest class would be and when your latest class would be.
Okay. Generally, we operate on average 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And on Sunday morning, we operate from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. So we're really only operating 8 hours a week. Sometimes during the wrestling season, we may operate more hours, maybe right after school, 3:30, but we'll never be in there past 9 p.m. And we most likely won't be in there during the week earlier than school starts because most of our members are in school during that time.
And could you just give me that weekend time again? Because I didn't get
the Sunday practice is 10 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Thank you.
And Mr. DeFilippis, in terms of these classes, would you estimate the average number of people that are in a class at any given time?
Sure. We average throughout the year, I would say 25 to 40 kids per class. Right now, in the month of June, we probably had about 30 kids in class. That number goes up during the wrestling season, but it only really goes up for a month or two, probably from January to February, early March, and then it drops off in mid-March. The most kids that we've ever had in class is probably capped off at about 50, but that's very rare, and it doesn't last long.
And in terms of these classes, these are generally the majority of people that take these classes. These are sort of drop-off, pickup style things where individuals are not staying on site. It's parents that are dropping off their kids and picking them back up again. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And again, all the times that you had been operating out of the Arbor Rescue, there had never been any issue that you're aware of in terms of inadequate parking on the site.
No, never.
Okay. I believe that is it for my directive, Mr. DeFilippis.
Anyone have any questions on the board for Mr. DeFilippis? So, Mr. DeFilippis, there would not be engines or anything at this location? Did you hear me?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I'm sorry, you wouldn't be scheduling like a rival wrestling club versus your wrestling club at this location, some type of competition or anything?
No.
Strictly training, strictly just the kids learning the art and the skills of wrestling?
Yeah, just our members, friends of our program, just training practices. That's it.
Okay.
I have a
Anyone else
question.
have any questions?
Yeah, I have a
Yeah,
question.
please.
It sounds like most of the people will be drop off and pickups. Will there be people needing to park for the hour or two that their children will be participating?
Sure. We do have parents that want to stay and watch practice. Not every parent wants to do that, but some do. So we do have a number of parents that do like to stay and watch their kids practice.
And where will they be parking?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Where will they be parking?
So again, the practices are 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. So they would be parking during those times.
I think he had indicated where they would be parking. And just to clarify, there is parking spaces provided on site on the correct, Mr. DeFilippis?
Yeah, there's a very large parking lot compared to the building that we just occupied in Scotch Plains that we moved from. The parking lot at Piscataway is significantly bigger than the parking lot that we had in Scotch Plains, and we never had any issues in Scotch Plains. So I don't anticipate having any issues in Piscataway.
I believe it's indicated that there's 42 spaces on site, so there is a number of parking spaces.
Correct, yes.
We good, Steve?
The 42 parking spaces, is that part of the Arbor Fire Company or is it open for anyone?
It is not. The fire company has a adjoining lot that is not part of the 42 spaces. There are several other, obviously, large parking fields over in the firehouse.
Thank you.
Mr. DeFilippis, prior to the shutting down of the Yale Street Club, how many members did you have? How many students?
So we currently have over 100 members. We've had that number for the last 2 years or so. But we have our classes split up by age group. So not all 100 members are scheduled to be there at the same time. Monday and Wednesday, we have our youth group, and Tuesday and Thursday, we have our high school group. So we average probably between 25 and 40 kids per practice. That's our average throughout the year. It goes up sometimes during our busy season during the winter, but again, that only lasts for a month or two.
Would you say the split 50-50 between the younger kids and the teenagers, or is it more teenagers?
It's split. I would say it was split, yeah.
Okay. Any other members have? Mr. Arch, you can proceed.
I have a couple questions.
Sorry, Jim.
Is the
Go ahead,
interior of this equipped with lockers or showers or bathrooms or any of that stuff?
We have lockers. We do not provide showers. We have bathrooms. We have bathrooms and lockers. We don't have any existing showers in the building, but most of our members are young kids, and they usually shower when they get home from practice. They don't generally. High school kids and youth kids don't usually shower on site.
Okay. How about bumps and bruises? Who takes care of that?
We have a first aid kit available on location, and again, we've been operating since 2013. We have not had any major injuries. One injury that we have had that happened in our old location in Scotch Plains was a sprained ankle, or it happened on location, and the child's parent was there to take him to the hospital to get an MRI and find out that the ankle was sprained. That's usually how it works in the club situation. Bloody noses, things like that, jammed fingers, like those are common injuries in our sport. And we have tape, we have nose plugs, we have a first aid kit that's fully stocked, and we're equipped to handle that. I'm also certified in CPR, being my job as a police officer. So I'm ready to handle any of those situations that become serious if it were to happen. But luckily we haven't had to deal with that in the recent past.
Thank you.
Got a couple
Any
questions. Mr.
other
Kennedy.
questions? Anyone?
Just quickly, how many instructors are at the site at any given time?
So we have 4 coaches on staff, and usually we have 1 coach, 1 to 2 coaches on scene at during practices.
And out of the high school kids that attend the classes, do any of them drive themselves to the facility? I would imagine high school age kids.
Yes.
There are some that do.
Yes.
You have an approximate number, perhaps, of the high school kids that would drive?
I
there?
don't. It's not a very big number because most of our kids are under 17. By the time they become seniors and they turn 17, they start to drive. But it's not a big number. Our most of our members are 5 years old up to 17, 18. So it's not a big number of kids that actually drive themselves. And even the kids that are able to drive themselves, their parents still like to bring them and still stay involved with their development.
All I have.
I have one follow-up question. The younger kids that get dropped off twice a week, what do you do about the parent that doesn't show up at 9 o'clock?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? The parents that don't show up?
The younger kids that are twice a week.
Yes.
And the session is over at 9?
No, our sessions are over at 7:30.
Okay. What do you do when the parents don't show up?
We have not had to deal with that often. Most of our parents are pretty responsible in picking up their children on time. I've said maybe I could count probably on one hand the amount of times that a parent hasn't been there with a kid, and we stay there until they're picked up, and it hasn't been longer than maybe 15 minutes after the practice ended where we had to stay.
It's a common problem with daycare centers. And
I'm sure. Luckily, we haven't had to deal with that too often. So.
Okay. Any other member of the board have any questions? Hearing none, Mr. Archer, please proceed.
Thank you. Our last witness tonight will be Miss Allison Coffin, our professional planner.
Ms. Coffin, can you raise your right hand?
Yes, I can.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Your name and address, please.
Allison Coffin, Coffin. I work for James W. Higgins Associates. We're at 14 Tilton Drive, Ocean Township, New Jersey.
Ms. Coffin has been accepted as an expert planner by this board on numerous occasions.
Please
Still have my
proceed.
license.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Ms. Coffin, if you could, I know that you're familiar with the site and the proposed activities. If you could please take us through the benefit of your expert opinion.
Sure. The applicant is proposing use and occupancy of the former Arbor Rescue Building. It's located at the intersection of Walnut and West 7th Streets. The uses proposed for this building are some for the applicant's personal use, office space and personal storage for their car collection, and then uses associated with the wrestling school and the weight training gym. The property in question was developed as the Arbor Rescue Squad building, which consists of a 3-bay garage, meeting and office space. In addition to housing the rescue squad, the building had been used for public gathering space for decades. My Mima would go there to play bingo, dragging my father along when he was a child. So I know that building has been there for quite some time. In addition to the building itself, the fully developed site has an existing radio antenna and 42 parking spaces to support the use and occupancy of the building. The applicant's proposing no physical alterations to the site other than what they've agreed upon that's in Mr. Hinterstein's report. The property is located in the R75 residential zone, and that zone permits single-family dwellings and governmental parks and playgrounds, governmental buildings and uses. The proposed uses in this building are not permitted in the zone, therefore D variance relief is requested. The applicant is proposing no new bulk variances, but there are a number of existing variance conditions that remain and will be unaltered. And those include maximum building coverage, front yard setback, side yard setback to the accessory structure, that radio antenna, and the accessory structure height. That radio antenna is permitted to be 18 feet and it exceeds that height, although I don't have the exact number, but we're not proposing any changes to it. It's my opinion that special reasons exist for the granting of the requested D1 variances, and the variances for these uses can be granted with no detriment to the health, safety, and general welfare of the public. The special reasons concept is advanced in this case in that the site is particularly suited to the uses proposed. This site is fully developed with a non-residential structure that's supported by a large parking field. The site and the existing structure are not well suited for conforming single-family residential use. The site is ideally and particularly suited to the uses as proposed. The site contains a large structure that has a 3-bay garage space with higher ceilings, and the space is ideal for the storage of the owner's car collection. The structure has office space adjacent to this garage, which the owner is using. The site has meeting room space that is ideal for the wrestling club, and another room that is well suited to the weight training gym. These are complementary uses with some overlap between members, and the site provides 42 off-street parking spaces, which is adequate to support the uses proposed. There is, in my opinion, no substantial detriment to the granting of the requested use variances. The proposed uses are not significantly different in character and impact from the original rescue squad use, at least in terms of noise, odors, traffic, and aesthetics. Far less likely to have ambulance sirens. The property itself can accommodate the parking for the uses on the site with no parking impact to the surrounding area. And the site is located at an intersection with a cluster of other non-residential uses, including the firehouse, an automotive garage, and the fairgrounds up the street beyond the firehouse. The proposed uses are compatible with this area right around it. The proposed variance would not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the master plan and zoning ordinance. This is a unique site that was developed with a non-residential use that historically included public gathering space. The proposal makes efficient and appropriate use of this pre-existing unique site and structure, which is not suited to conforming uses. And for those reasons, it's my opinion that the board would be justified in granting the requested use variances for this application.
Thank you, Ms. Coffin. I have no further questions.
Does any member of the board have any questions or comments for this witness? Hearing none. Jim, can I ask Henry to go over the zoning impact before we open it to the public?
Yes, I think that's appropriate.
Sure. Henry, please go over the zoning impact
Yeah,
on
I
your
mean,
site impact report.
Sure. I mean, item number 1 of my zoning impact comments, I think just that the appropriate testimony needs to be provided, and I think that that Mrs. Coffin, did that. And during my site visit, again, the building was being used basically as a mechanic shop when I was there. There's vehicles parked outside. The applicant had stated that this work had stopped. But it obviously had not, because again, I was there today and this work was actually going on. Use of a garage as a storage for vehicles in its own, I think, constitutes a private garage when it's not accessory to a residential use. And I think that's a problem, especially in this particular case. Because the building was previously used or had garages, again, the use was for a public use as what is allowed in the zoning in a residential zone, because it was for a rescue squad. As far as the assembly area, again, I really don't, looking at the previous assembly use, I think there was bingo there once a month that took place for a couple hours. I don't think that really was any kind of nuisance to the neighbors, but to then allow, I think, uninhibited assembly. I don't think the assembly component is necessary in order to run the wrestling school or training center, weight training. So again, I don't see the assembly component being necessary, just because the building is large and because assembly may have taken place there prior, it also now has other uses that are being associated with the building, the training center, and the weight training and the wrestling training. So I don't necessarily feel that the building has to be suited for 600 uses or 5 uses or whatever. If there's 1 or 2 suitable uses for the building to repurpose it, which I believe the wrestling training and weight training facility does do a good job of repurposing this building and doesn't really create a detrimental impact to the surrounding neighborhood. But my biggest issue is, again, the assembly area, more than I think what previously or historically took place at that building, which was, once a month is an issue, as well as the car parking. Again, it's been shown that, I don't know if, the applicant can be relied on to say that, no work is going to take place or no mechanical work is going to take place because, again, the track record has been that this has been going on and continues to go on at this site. I think that the garage bays or that area in that building could be repurposed for something else, perhaps, whether it's something associated with the training center or the weight training center or the wrestling training. But in my opinion, I don't see how that's not going to be, using that as a garage is not a detrimental impact to the surrounding neighborhood when private garages aren't allowed in the residential zone. I think that basically sums it up. Again, I believe the training center, both weight, which I imagine is accessory to this wrestling training. I really didn't hear any testimony that, the weight training would be a standalone where people would have memberships just for that. Maybe that could be touched on, but as an accessory use to the wrestling training center, again, I don't have any issue with either of those. And again, with the stipulation that I think the hours are limited to 9 p.m. Them agreeing to the other conditions of the staff report, I definitely believe that those uses could be looked upon favorably. But again, I just don't see that the standards or see how the municipal land use law is advanced and the town zone plan is advanced by allowing assembly and that garage storage on that site.
If I can just briefly, just to address Mr. Hinterstein's comment as to assembly, I took the assembly aspect to be addressed, that we are not having spectator events there. So we certainly agree.
Yeah.
We are not proposing anything to that extent. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. And again, I just want to stress that I believe Mr. Bona's testimony was that that activity would not continue. I don't think he specifically said that it was not happening currently in terms of possible repairs at the site. But again, the only comment that I would make is it's an area that otherwise would be dead space. And whether it's a car that's being stored in there or whether it's a stack of cardboard boxes that's being stored in there, as long as it is passively and statically stored in there, it wouldn't make a difference either way what it is. But I understand certainly your concerns, Mr. Hinterstein.
Mr. Roach, let me ask you a question. The assembly use, what is the applicant proposing for that? Because I have not heard any testimony with regard to the assembly use.
I'll defer to Mr. Bona. I don't think we are proposing any sort of assembly use in the building, but I'll ask Mr. Bona if he has any anything particular in mind. I think that was that word got worked into the application at some point, and quite frankly, I don't know when it got worked into the application. But
well, and what I will say is, if we don't have any details on that, we're not going to grant an approval to an open-ended assembly use with no
and we are not asking for that. I think and again, that was my comment to Mr. Hinterstein, is that I think our testimony is that we are not asking for an open-ended assembly use. We are asking for the wrestling, we are asking for the weight training, we are asking for the storage garage. Those are our three use variance requests.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just comment briefly, I agree with Henry on the wrestling and weight training. I think it's a use that is particularly suited to this location. You had no testimony whatsoever on assembly use, so there's no basis to grant it in any case. And the garage parking is really a convenience to Mr. Bonner. There's no particular basis that this meets a use variance standard. And I don't think Allison tried to represent that. She focused on the main room. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, John. Any other questions? Any other members have questions? Hearing none, I'm going to open it to the general public. Anyone in the public portion have any questions or comments about this application? I would ask that there are a lot of residents on hold right now, so if you could keep your comments to a minimum of 3 minutes. Ms. Buckley, you could help me out with that? Thank you.
The first one's a gentleman named Mark. He's raising his hand.
Mark, can
Mark,
you
you're
raise your right
muted.
hand and I need to swear you in?
Mark, you're
Could
muted.
you unmute yourself? Please unmute.
Mark, you're muted. There you go.
How's that?
That's much
Okay.
better.
Okay, Mark, I need to swear you in. Could you raise your right hand and do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes.
Could I have your full name and address, please?
Mark Hardenberg, 1838 Brunella Avenue, 1838 1838 Brunella Avenue, Piscataway, New Jersey.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Got screwed up because my camera got pointed in the wrong direction.
It's all good.
No worries.
Okay. Hey, how about removing the Arbor Rescue Squad sign? It's been months and months, and it's not a rescue squad. Get rid of it. And I understand that there are certain things that, you probably don't have much of a choice. I mean, the setbacks. He's asking for bulk variance relief. Did the applicant try to purchase adjacent land to possibly meet the bulk requirement? Specifically, did the applicant try to purchase the adjacent land on Walnut Street?
To my knowledge, there was no attempt to purchase any additional land. I will note that the lot itself, in terms of overall lot size, I believe is conforming.
Why are you asking for a bulk variance? Because your coverage is too much for the size of the lot? I'll answer the question. Yes, the coverage is too much for the size of the lot.
Correct. My comment was, though, that the lot itself, the lot size itself, which is what triggers the municipal land use laws requirement to seek purchase of adjacent property to bring it into otherwise conformity. That has to do with the lot size.
Go ahead, Mr. Hardenberg. Please address your questions to the board.
Okay, yes, I will. The next question that I have deals with the assembly area. When I read that, it was not clear if it was a meeting room, if it was a light manufacturing area where they were going to do some assembly work, or if it was an outside space where maybe they were going to have car shows. I thought that whole thing was too vague. And I also feel that they're trying to throw too many uses into one building. If you grant everything they're asking, that will be the most intense use that building has ever seen. And I've lived here since 1972. And we have been very lucky that we have been able to see the area go from a very busy, noisy area to a nice, quiet residential area. And I'm concerned that that's changing, because when people meet there, and I guess it's the wrestling club, they go flying down the street, drag racing, speeding, noise. Some of these cars sound like a fart machine. On purpose, they just make as much noise as they can. And when it's 10 o'clock at night, you know, people are trying to sleep. We would like to live in a nice, quiet area.
Mr. Hardenberg, there's been no testimony before the board about the assembly use. I don't believe that that's going to be approved by the board.
Excellent. The garage talks about, in the literature that you send out, it talked about storage and repair of personal vehicles. Whose personal vehicle? My personal vehicle? Your personal vehicle? His personal vehicle? There should be no repair of vehicles. I mean, I know that there was a rescue squad there and they had ambulances, but they didn't repair the stuff there. They took it to a repair facility and had it done there.
There's no application for a repair business at that site.
Well, when I read it, it said that he was applying for garage storage and repair of personal vehicles. And I want to highlight.
Testimony here tonight is
Yeah,
no
well,
repairs.
Mark,
Okay.
if you listen to Mr. Hinterstein, he kind of addressed those issues.
Yes, but I want to
What-
highlight what he
what
said.
is
I agree
written
with
and what's
Mr.
being asked
Hinterstein. He
for
did a
and
very
what-
good job. And I want to highlight those and make sure that his comments are not in vain.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hardenberg. Ms. Buckley?
I think that's all I had. Just let me look real quick. I talked about two things that I thought were a problem. And I would say to the zoning board, please remember the negative criteria when you vote, as some of these things are probably not useful for the neighborhood and are detrimental.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Mark.
you.
Ms. Buckley, next person?
Next one is Patty, I need stronger glasses, Patty Antol?
Yes, that's correct.
Antol.
Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear that testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
Yes, sir.
Your name and address, please.
Patty Antol, Antol, 1775 West 5th Street, Piscataway, rear property line, basically, from where we're talking about.
Thank you.
I just have a few simple questions. Is there any proposed change or enhancement to the outdoor lighting?
Do you want, I can certainly address that. One of Mr. Hinterstein's comments was which we agreed to incorporate if there is as a condition, if there is a approval, was to address the lighting with LED lighting and to provide appropriate lighting, no more flood lighting, because I think there's an existing floodlight on the site. And I'll defer to Mr. Hinterstein if he has anything else to add to that.
Yeah, that actually reminds me, I wonder, is Mr. Hinterstein's memo available to the public for view, or is that something just between you guys? Just, I mean, it may not relate to anything that would be of interest to me, but I don't know. You just mentioned, there's a bunch of stuff on it that we're not addressing here.
You know what? Maybe I'll just briefly go over it this way.
Thank you. Thank you, Henry. Smart move.
Questions, yeah, it may answer some of the questions the neighbors have. So basically, all missing and damaged curbing and sidewalk along both road frontages need to be replaced. All damaged sidewalk around the building needs to be replaced to provide safe and ADA accessible access. The existing parking lot is in poor condition, needs to be adequately repaired. The parking lot striping does not meet standards for angled parking. It should be reevaluated so a conforming striping and circulation plan can be provided. The appropriate ADA spaces and signage should be provided. The applicant needs to conform to the state's electric vehicle charging station ordinance, which again, they've agreed to all of these. At a minimum, 10 feet of pavement should be removed from the rear of the property to provide an area for landscape buffering, which should consist of 6-foot-high evergreen conifers. 6-foot solid fence should be installed along both the westerly and northerly property lines for screening and buffering of the site. The existing site lighting needs to be detailed for the site. Existing pole heights and fixture description should be provided along with the intensity plan so that the existing lighting for the site can be evaluated. The existing lights appear to be floodlights, which are not permitted. The light fixture should be replaced with efficient LED cutoff fixtures. Pavement should be removed from the front and sides of the building where possible to provide landscape and shade trees as required in the site plan ordinance. Currently, the site is void of all landscaping and trees and is rather unattractive. The existing side planter should be aesthetically landscaped. The appropriate site improvement detail should be provided. as required. That's basically the staff report. So all of those items, I believe if they get an approval, they agree to, they'll be addressed in some form to our township satisfaction.
Okay, thanks. Just two more quick ones then. Thank you for that. The Sunday flea market still occurs from April through November or December. I wonder if the parking was taken into consideration with Mr. DeFilippis's use from 10 to 12 on Sundays, if he's run into any issues with that, because typically the flea market fills up that parking lot pretty nicely, the whole thing.
Mr. Arch.
Well, I'll certainly indicate that again, there are two separate parking lots. There was, at the suggestion, I believe, of the township early on in the application, that a rollable or closable fence to section off our side of the parking lot from the fire side of the parking lot be implemented, so that when those meets occur, or when those flea markets occur, that we can ensure that our parking and the flea market parking is kept separate, so that we still have adequate parking. And we show that on our plan.
Great. All right, last one, I promise. As far as the auto storage and all of that, I'm just wondering about the hours there, being that it's really Mr. Bonna's personal vehicle, his son's working, whatever they're doing there. I wonder if they're going to be going in and out of there, like Mr. Hardenberg mentioned, running vehicles late at night, as opposed to just the normal use that Mr. DeFilippis is proposing for his classes.
I would ask Mr. Bonna if those if the 9 p.m. cutoff time for activities on the site, would you agree as well that would also apply to accessing that garage as well?
These are going to be dead storage vehicles. These are not cars that are used these are like high valued cars that are not used probably maybe once every 2 weeks. Maybe one of the cars are used once every 2 weeks. These are not everyday used cars. So they are put in that garage and they're stored in there. It's locked and it's not going to be, the door's not even going to be opened.
It's not accessible to the kids in the gym or anything like that.
There's a firewall that separates the storage garage from the office and the wrestling club. They're very high value Japanese imported cars that are not, they maybe 200 miles a year on the car is put on that car.
Can I come over and look at these cars? They look
whenever you want. Whenever you want.
You're in my backyard. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you, Patty.
Ms. Buckley?
No one else is raising their hand.
Okay.
Ronald,
problem.
I have a question. I don't know how to raise my hand on the thing. Sorry.
That's okay.
My name is.
Could I get your name and address, please?
Yes, Teresa Rudnicki-Jones, 121 Bond Street, Bridgewater, New Jersey.
Thank you. Could you raise your right hand? I need to swear you
Yes.
in.
I have my right hand raised.
Do you swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Only two questions. One question is, will there be any loitering of students outside the rescue squad of the building?
No.
No loitering at all.
No, they immediately go into their cars and they leave.
Okay. Second question, can students from, children from the neighborhood or high school students, can they join this club?
Yes, they can.
Mark, if I
Let Donnie answer that, I guess.
Yes. So we have been getting a lot of local kids from Piscataway and South Plainfield and the surrounding areas that are showing interest in joining our club. And one of the things that, as a police officer in my community, one of the things that I do have to point out that I feel is important is that we are not doing this just to make a profit. We're not doing this just to run a business. If it was about making a profit, I probably wouldn't even be doing this. I could work overtime. We have plenty of overtime in Summit as a police officer. I could work every day if I wanted to. I'm doing this because I love coaching wrestling. I love coaching kids, and I love giving back to the community. And we have a lot of kids in the surrounding towns that we give free memberships to. A lot of, underprivileged kids that can't afford going to a wrestling club, but love wrestling. Nowadays, in all sports, not just wrestling, but baseball and lacrosse and all these sports. I mean, it's starting to become specialization, and club sports is starting to take over. Soccer, I mean, you're seeing it happen on a national level. And there's a lot of kids that are really good at wrestling that can't afford a wrestling club, and we give free memberships to kids that can't afford it. So we're not just here to make a profit. We're here to try to give back to the community. So it's, again, I mean, to answer your question, like, yeah, there's a lot of kids from the local community that we provide a service to, and we don't do it just to get their money. We do it sometimes for free for a lot of kids. So.
Okay,
Thank you.
'cause I know
Dennis.
it could be
Appreciate it.
really beneficial in that for the students. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Ms. Buckley?
Don't see anyone else's hands.
Seeing none, I'm going to close the public portion. Mr. Keneally, I will need some instruction. I am in favor of the two aspects of this application, the wrestling and the weightlifting.
You have four use variances before you. Number one is the public garage. Number two is the assembly, which you've heard no testimony about.
Right.
Number three is the wrestling club. Number four is the weightlifting. If you feel that the wrestling club and the weightlifting are permissible, then you can vote in favor of that. If you don't believe that there's been adequate testimony on the first two, then you can vote against those.
I would make a motion to vote against the assembly and to vote against the private garage. And in favor of the weightlifting and the wrestling. Can I get a second?
I'll have a second.
Thank you, Calpage. Can I get call the roll?
Mr. Weissman,
Yes.
Mr. Tillery,
Yes.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Reggio,
Yes.
Mr. Blount. Did we lose? Rodney? Mr. Hidaka
Yes.
and Chairman Cahill.
Yes.
I thank you all for your time and for your patience tonight, and I thank you for I think the attention and the thought that you put into this. One thing that I will ask, or that I will add, is that I know that we're trying to get the wrestling club up and running as soon as possible, and with the additional site improvements that we are agreeing to do, I know it's going to take some time to put together to show those on an approved site plan and to go through that. I would like to ask the board's permission to be able to operate that wrestling club as part of a TCO sooner than being able to complete all of those site approvals. And I don't know if that has to be done by way of a developer's agreement or what the mechanism would be, but
yeah, Mr. Arch, I don't believe the zoning board has that authority. You'll have to take that up with the township.
But certainly no objection if we can enter into a developer's agreement with the township to hash those issues out.
Mr. Cahill, you don't have any objection to that?
None whatsoever.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arch.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Let's move on to, you too, my friend. Let's move on to item number 13, which is the adoption of resolutions from the regular meeting of June 9th, 2022.
First resolution is Paul Cotterill. This application, based upon the amended application, was approved. Mr. Weissman?
Yes.
Mr. Tillery?
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Mr. Oreggio?
Yes.
Mr. Blunt?
Yes.
Mr. Heyduka?
Yes.
Mr. Mitterondo?
You muted.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Ali?
Yes.
Chairman Cahill?
Yes.
Second resolution is Carl Walton. This application was approved. Mr. Weissman,
Yes.
Mr. Tillery,
Yes.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Oreggio,
Yes.
Mr. Blunt, Mr. Heyduka,
Yes.
Mr. Mitterondo,
Yes.
Mr. Ali,
Yes.
Chairman Cahill.
Yes.
Those are all the resolutions I have.
Item number 14 is adoption of the minutes from the regular meeting of June 9th, 2022. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Like to make a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Once again, you guys impressed me. Not long meeting tonight, lot of material to cover, and thank you all for your volunteering. Have a great couple of weeks, and we'll see you in July.
Yeah. Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th.
Get the fireworks.
Good night, guys.